22 years of flying had carved routines into his soul, as precisely as flight patterns etched across Caribbean skies. But this Tuesday morning felt different. At 44, Dylan had learned to trust his instincts, and something in the warm Florida air whispered that his carefully ordered world was about to encounter unexpected turbulence. He adjusted his crisp white captain shirt and checked his watch. 0630 hours, 30 minutes before briefing. The early morning ritual calmed him, reviewing weather patterns, checking maintenance logs, ensuring every detail aligned perfectly for the safety of his passengers and crew. Flying had saved him 6 years ago, when grief threatened to ground him permanently. And he'd built his recovery on the solid foundation of professional excellence and emotional control. The hangar doors opened with their familiar metallic echo, and Dylan heard Chief Purser Francine Deepwater's authoritative voice directing the morning crew assembly. Francine had been with Atlantic Airways for 15 years, climbing every rung of the corporate ladder through sheer determination and uncompromising professionalism. Her respect meant everything in an industry where reputations followed you from airline to airline. "Good morning, Captain Hartwell," came a voice behind him, melodic with the unmistakable lilt of the Caribbean. Dylan turned and felt something shift in his chest. A flutter that had nothing to do with pre-flight nerves and everything to do with the striking young woman, approaching with confident steps and a professional smile that could outshine the Miami dawn. She was beautiful in a way that transcended the typical airline industry polish. Her rich dark skin seemed to glow with its own inner light, and her dark hair was styled in an elegant updo that emphasized the graceful line of her neck. But it was her eyes that stopped him, intelligent, determined, carrying the quiet strength of someone who'd earned every opportunity she'd been given. Her Atlantic Airways uniform fit her curvy figure perfectly, but it was the way she carried herself that commanded attention, shoulders back, chin lifted, radiating the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly who she was and where she belonged. She carried a steaming cup of coffee in one hand and a tablet with flight manifests in the other. As she moved toward him with graceful efficiency, the coffee sloshed precariously in its paper cup. "I'm Amelia King, your new senior flight attendant for the Barbados route," she continued, extending her hand with the kind of firm handshake that spoke of proper Caribbean upbringing and professional training. "Chief Purser Deepwater assigned me to your crew starting today." Dylan reached to accept her handshake just as she shifted her tablet. The movement sent her coffee cup tipping forward, its contents spilling across the front of his crisp white captain shirt. "Oh my goodness," Amelia exclaimed, her accent thickening momentarily before she quickly composed herself. "Captain, I apologize for the inconvenience." She efficiently set down her tablet and reached for the napkins in her pocket, then paused, a flash of awareness crossing her face about the impropriety of touching her new captain's chest. Dylan found himself oddly unbothered by the hot coffee soaking through to his skin. "First day with a new crew?" he asked, accepting the napkins from her and dabbing at his shirt. "Not first day nerves, Captain," she replied with a quiet dignity that impressed him. Just the universe's way of making an introduction memorable. There was no flustered apology in her manner. Just the composed response of someone who handled unexpected situations with grace. "Well, it worked," Dylan replied, continuing to blot his shirt. "I doubt I'll forget meeting you, Miss King." Their eyes met over the crumpled napkins, and something passed between them, a moment of recognition that transcended the awkwardness of spilled coffee and soaked shirts. King. Dylan's aviation knowledge kicked in immediately. Everyone in Caribbean aviation knew that name. Captain Johan King was a legend, the man who'd broken barriers and built bridges throughout the region's aviation industry. This had to be his daughter, carrying not just a famous surname, but the weight of extraordinary expectations. "Captain Dylan Hartwell," he replied, taking her hand and feeling an unexpected jolt of electricity at the contact. Her skin was warm and soft, but her grip spoke of strength and determination. He held the handshake perhaps a moment longer than strictly professional, studying her face and trying to reconcile her obvious youth with the mature confidence in her eyes. "Welcome to the crew, Miss King. I've heard excellent things about your training scores." A genuine smile lit up her features, transforming her professional demeanor into something radiant. Thank you, Captain. I'm honored to be flying the route home to Barbados. This route, it means everything to me. There was something in the way she said home that caught his attention, a mixture of pride and longing that spoke of deep roots and ambitious dreams. Dylan found himself wanting to know more about this young woman who carried herself with such grace, despite being barely out of training. Your father's Captain Johann King, isn't he? Dylan asked, genuine respect coloring his voice. I had the privilege of meeting him at the Caribbean Aviation Safety Conference 2 years ago. Remarkable man. His contributions to regional aviation safety protocols have saved countless lives. Amelia's smile grew even brighter, if that were possible, and Dylan caught a glimpse of the devoted daughter beneath the professional exterior. Yes, he is. Papa always says that aviation is about building bridges between islands, between cultures, between hearts. He taught me that every flight is an opportunity to honor the trust passengers place in us. The passion in her voice was unmistakable, and Dylan felt something stir in his chest that had nothing to do with professional respect. Here was someone who understood aviation as more than just a job. She saw it as a calling, a way to connect people and cultures across the vast blue spaces of the Caribbean. That's a beautiful way to think about it, Dylan replied, and meant it. Your father raised you with the right values for this industry. He did, Amelia agreed, then added with a slight grin that hinted at playful confidence, though he might argue I inherited my stubbornness from my mother's side of the family. Mama Grace always says king women don't just fly, we soar. Dylan chuckled, charmed by her easy confidence and the obvious love in her voice when she spoke of her family. There was something magnetic about her blend of professionalism and warmth, of Caribbean culture and aviation excellence. He found himself curious about her story, her dreams, her perspective on the industry they both served. Well, we'll see how that king soaring translates to our Miami-Bridgetown route, he said with a smile. I have a feeling you're going to fit right in. I intend to, Captain, Amelia replied, with quiet determination. This isn't just any route for me. It's my chance to prove that Caribbean aviation excellence runs in the blood, and that age is just a number when it comes to professional competence. There it was, a subtle acknowledgement of her youth delivered with such confidence that Dylan couldn't help but admire her directness. She wasn't trying to hide her age or pretend to be older. She was claiming her place based on skill and heritage. And that took courage in an industry that often valued experience over everything else. Experience comes in many forms, Dylan said thoughtfully. Cultural knowledge, family heritage, fresh perspectives, all valuable assets in international aviation. Before Amelia could respond, Chief Purser Francine's voice carried across the hangar. Crew briefing in 5 minutes. Captain Hartwell, Miss King, let's move. Shall we? Dylan gestured toward the briefing room, and they walked together across the polished hangar floor. He couldn't help but notice the grace in her movement, the way she seemed to glide rather than simply walk. There was something almost musical about her, as if the Caribbean rhythms of her homeland had settled into the very way she moved through the world. The briefing room buzzed with pre-flight energy as the crew assembled around the large table. Dylan took his position at the head, while Amelia found her seat among the other flight attendants. He noticed how she carried herself, back straight, hands folded professionally, attention focused completely on the proceedings. But there was something else, a quality of stillness that suggested deep waters beneath her composed surface. Good morning, everyone, Dylan began, his authoritative captain's voice filling the room. Today we're flying Miami to Bridgetown with a full passenger load. 287 souls on board. Weather looks favorable, but we've got some scattered showers developing over the Windward Islands that we'll need to monitor. He pulled up the route map on the briefing room screen, his laser pointer tracing their flight path across the Caribbean. Flight time approximately 4 hours and 15 minutes. We'll be cruising at 38,000 feet, and I want everyone aware that this is peak hurricane season. So we'll be maintaining close contact with San Juan Center for any weather updates. As Dylan continued the briefing, he found his attention repeatedly drawn to Amelia. She was taking detailed notes, asking intelligent questions about passenger service protocols, and demonstrating the kind of thorough preparation that marked the best flight attendants. But there was something else. When he mentioned their destination, her entire demeanor seemed to light up with an inner glow that had nothing to do with professional duty and everything to do with personal connection. "Ms. King," Dylan said, making a decision that surprised him with its spontaneity. "Since this is your first time working the Barbados route and you're obviously familiar with the destination, would you mind sharing any cultural insights that might help us provide better service to our passengers?" Amelia's face brightened with genuine enthusiasm, and when she spoke, her melodic accent seemed to grow richer with emotion. "Of course, Captain. Barbadian passengers, we call ourselves Bajans, really appreciate when crew members understand our culture. Simple things like knowing that lime means spending quality time together, or that family connections run deep in our society. Many of our passengers will be returning home to family they haven't seen in months. So this flight represents more than transportation, it's a homecoming." Dylan found himself leaning forward slightly, drawn in by the passion in her voice. "What else should we know?" "Music is incredibly important to us," Amelia continued, her eyes sparkling. "You might hear passengers humming calypso or soca rhythms. That's normal and actually a good sign that they're feeling comfortable. And food, if passengers mention wanting to smell their mama's cooking again. That's not just hunger talking, that's homesickness for the very essence of Barbados." The other crew members were listening intently, clearly impressed by her cultural knowledge and the genuine love for her homeland that colored every word. Dylan felt something warm unfurling in his chest as he watched her speak. This wasn't just professional competence. This was someone sharing a piece of her soul. "Thank you, Miss King," Dylan said, meaning it more than she probably realized. That kind of cultural understanding is exactly what makes the difference between good service and exceptional service. Jennifer Adamson, one of the senior flight attendants, smiled approvingly. "I love flying with crew members who bring that personal connection to the route. It makes everything more meaningful." As the briefing continued with technical details and safety protocols, Dylan found himself stealing glances at Amelia. There was something about her presence that energized the entire room, a warmth and authenticity that seemed to draw people in naturally. He watched her interact with the other crew members, noting how she listened intently, asked thoughtful questions, and offered help without being asked. "All right, everyone," Dylan concluded as they wrapped up the briefing. "Let's make this a smooth flight for our passengers. Remember, we're not just transporting people. We're helping families reunite, bringing people home, connecting hearts across the water." As the crew began to disperse toward their pre-flight duties, Dylan found himself walking alongside Amelia toward the aircraft. The morning sun was now fully up, painting everything in golden light that seemed to make her skin glow with inner radiance. "I have to ask," Dylan said, his curiosity overriding his usual professional reserve. "What made you choose Atlantic Airways for your career? With your father's reputation, I imagine you had opportunities throughout the Caribbean." Amelia's smile held a hint of determination mixed with vulnerability. "That's exactly why I chose to build my career here first. Papa's legacy opens doors, but it also means everyone's watching to see if I can fly on my own wings. I wanted to prove myself somewhere that would judge me by my work, not my family name." Dylan felt a surge of respect for her courage and integrity. That takes real strength, choosing the harder path to prove your worth. "Papa always taught me that easy paths don't build strong wings," Amelia replied with a soft laugh. "Besides, I've dreamed of flying international routes since I was little. There's something magical about connecting different worlds, different cultures, through aviation." They'd reached the aircraft, and Dylan paused at the base of the mobile stairs, leading up to the cabin. The morning was warming up, and he could see the Caribbean sunshine reflected in Amelia's dark eyes. Something about this moment felt significant, though he couldn't quite name why. "Well, Ms. King," he said, extending his hand again, "welcome to international aviation. Something tells me you're going to do your father's legacy proud." "Thank you, Captain Hartwell," she replied, taking his hand with that same firm grip that had surprised him earlier. "I intend to honor not just Papa's legacy, but the trust you're placing in me as part of your crew." This time when their hands touched, Dylan felt more than just an electric jolt. He felt a recognition, as if some part of his soul had been waiting for this moment without realizing it. Her hand was warm and steady in his, and for just a heartbeat, the professional distance between captain and crew member seemed to dissolve into something far more personal and infinitely more dangerous. "I have a feeling," Dylan said quietly, his voice rougher than he intended, "that this is going to be a very interesting flight." Amelia's eyes widened slightly, and he caught a glimpse of something vulnerable and aware beneath her professional composure. "Yes, Captain," she said softly, her melodic accent wrapping around the words like a caress. "I believe it will be." As they climbed the stairs to begin their pre-flight preparations, Dylan couldn't shake the feeling that his carefully ordered world had just encountered a force that would change everything. The rational part of his mind reminded him about company policies, professional boundaries, and the 20-year age gap that made any personal interest inappropriate and potentially career-ending. But as he watched Amelia move through the cabin with graceful efficiency, greeting passengers with genuine warmth, and speaking to the Barbadian travelers in the comfortable rhythms of home, Dylan realized that some forces were stronger than policy, more dangerous than career considerations, and more persistent than the walls he built around his heart. The flight to Barbados stretched ahead of them like an uncharted course across azure seas, and for the first time in 6 years, Captain Dylan Hartwell found himself eager to discover where this particular journey might lead. The flight to Barbados became a masterclass in professional excellence wrapped around simmering attraction. As the Boeing 777 lifted off from Miami International, Dylan found himself aware of every movement in the cabin behind him, every melodic note of Amelia's voice as she interacted with passengers. Through the cockpit audio system, he could hear her speaking to Barbadian passengers in the comfortable rhythms of home, switching effortlessly between crisp professional English and the warm musical cadences of Bajan dialect. "Captain," came First Officer Jake Peters' voice, drawing Dylan's attention back to the instruments. "You seem unusually focused on cabin operations today." Dylan cleared his throat, realizing he'd been listening to the passenger announcements with far more attention than usual. "Just ensuring smooth operations, Jake. New crew member, want to make sure she integrates well." Jake glanced back toward the cabin, then gave Dylan a knowing look. "Ah, the King girl. Heard she's Johan's daughter. That's some serious aviation royalty." "She's a professional crew member," Dylan replied perhaps too quickly, "and I expect her to be treated as such." "Of course, Captain," Jake said with barely concealed amusement. "Strictly professional." 3 hours into the flight, Dylan made his routine cabin walk, ostensibly to check on passenger comfort, but truthfully hoping for another glimpse of Amelia in action. What he found exceeded his expectations. She was kneeling beside an elderly Barbadian woman who was clearly emotional about returning home, speaking in soft, rapid Bajan while holding the woman's weathered hands. "She telling me about her grandbaby she ain't seen in 2 years, Amelia was saying to Jennifer Adamson, her accent rich with empathy. "Sometimes home callin' your heart so strong, it'd make you cry happy tears." Dylan paused in the galley area, pretending to review passenger manifests while watching Amelia work. There was something almost magical about how she connected with people. Not just professionally, but soul to soul. She saw past the passenger service requirements to the human stories underneath, and her genuine care transformed routine interactions into moments of real connection. "Captain Hartwell," Amelia said, suddenly appearing beside him with a warm smile that made his pulse quicken. "Mrs. Thornton was just asking if you might say a few words to her grandson over the intercom when we get closer to Barbados. He's studying aviation at the University of the West Indies, and meeting a captain would mean the world to him." The request was simple, routine even, but the way Amelia presented it, with such genuine care for a passenger's happiness, struck something deep in Dylan's chest. "Of course," he said, studying her face and noting the way her eyes lit up with gratitude. "Family connections are important. They are everything in Caribbean culture," Amelia replied, her voice dropping to a more intimate tone as other crew members moved past them in the narrow galley. Appa always says that aviation isn't just about moving bodies from place to place. It's about keeping families connected across the water. They were standing closer than strictly necessary in the confined space, and Dylan caught the subtle scent of her perfume, something warm and tropical that reminded him of Caribbean nights and starlit beaches. When she reached past him to retrieve supplies from the overhead compartment, her arm brushed against his chest, and he felt electricity shoot through his entire nervous system. "Excuse me, Captain," she murmured, but didn't immediately step away. For a heartbeat that lasted forever, they were frozen in place, her hand still raised toward the compartment, his body responding to her nearness in ways that had nothing to do with professional protocol. "Amelia," he said quietly, her first name slipping out before he could stop it. The sound of it in his voice seemed to surprise them both, rough with something that definitely wasn't professional distance. She looked up at him, her dark eyes wide and suddenly vulnerable. "Captain?" Dylan started, then stopped, acutely aware that they were surrounded by passengers and crew. That company policies existed for good reasons, that she was young enough to be. He pushed that thought away. "Thank you for caring so much about the passengers. It makes a difference." Something flickered across her expression. Disappointment? Relief? Before he could analyze it, Jennifer's voice cut through the moment. "Amelia, could you help me with the meal service in first class?" "Of course," Amelia replied, stepping back and immediately returning to professional mode. But as she moved away, Dylan caught her glancing back at him with an expression that suggested their almost moment had affected her as much as it had him. The rest of the flight passed in a haze of professional efficiency and carefully maintained distance. Dylan made his announcement to Mrs. Thornton's grandson, earning Amelia's radiant smile from across the cabin. During landing preparations, he found excuses to observe her work, the way she moved through safety checks with graceful competence, how she calmed nervous passengers with gentle humor, the obvious pride in her eyes as the Barbadian coastline came into view. As they touched down at Grantley Adams International Airport, Dylan heard Amelia's voice over the cabin speakers, speaking in Bajan to the local passengers. "Welcome home, my people. Welcome back to beautiful Barbados, where the sun always shining and the heart's always warm." The emotion in her voice was unmistakable, and Dylan realized this wasn't just another destination for her. This was homecoming, heritage, the very essence of who she was. And something about witnessing her joy made his own heart feel lighter than it had in years. During the post-flight shutdown procedures, Dylan lingered in the cockpit longer than necessary, reviewing paperwork that didn't really need reviewing. The truth was, he wasn't sure how to navigate what had happened between them in the galley. The company had strict policies about crew relationships, especially between captains and subordinates. More than that, she was 24 to his 44. A gap that represented not just years but entire life stages. But when he finally emerged from the cockpit, he found Amelia waiting in the now empty cabin, her professional demeanor softened by something more personal. "Captain Hartwell," she said, her accent wrapping around his name like silk. "I wanted to thank you for welcoming me to your crew. Today felt special." "You made it special," Dylan replied honestly. "I've been flying this route for 3 years, and I've never seen passengers respond to crew the way they responded to you today. You have a gift." Amelia's smile was radiant, but there was something uncertain in her eyes. In Caribbean culture, we have a saying, "Every goodbye is hello waiting to happen." I'm hoping this crew assignment becomes a regular thing. "I'll request you for all the Barbados routes," Dylan said without thinking, then caught himself. "For professional reasons, of course. Your cultural knowledge is invaluable." "Of course," Amelia agreed, but her smile suggested she understood the deeper meaning behind his words. Professional reasons. They stood there in the empty cabin, surrounded by the lingering scent of tropical air drifting through the open aircraft door, and the distant sounds of Barbadian ground crews. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows, painting everything in golden light that seemed to make Amelia's skin glow with inner radiance. "Captain," she said softly, stepping slightly closer. Would you like to see real Barbados while we're here? I mean, the crew hotel is nice, but if you want to understand why this place means so much to me." Dylan knew he should say no. Company policies aside, Getting personally involved with someone 20 years younger was asking for complications he didn't need. But looking into her hopeful eyes, seeing the genuine desire to share something precious with him, he found his professional resolve crumbling. "I'd like that," he heard himself say. "Very much." Her smile could have powered the entire aircraft. "Meet me in the hotel lobby at 7. I promise to show you Barbados the way tourists never see it." As Dylan walked across the tarmac toward the crew transport, the warm Caribbean breeze carrying the scents of salt water and tropical flowers, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to cross a line from which there would be no return. But for the first time in 6 years, the prospect of stepping into uncharted territory felt more like an adventure than a threat. The Hilton Barbados Resort bustled with the efficient energy of crew changeovers and passenger connections, but Dylan barely noticed the familiar rhythms of airline operations. He'd changed from his captain's uniform into casual khakis and a light blue shirt, spending more time in front of the mirror than he'd admit, questioning everything from his choice of cologne to the wisdom of what he was about to do. At precisely 7 o'clock, he stepped off the elevator into the lobby and stopped breathing. Amelia stood near the entrance, wearing a flowing sundress in shades of coral and gold that complemented her rich skin tone perfectly. Her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and she looked so beautiful that Dylan felt something fundamental shift in his chest, a recognition that this was no longer about professional interest or cultural curiosity. "Captain," she said, approaching with a smile that lit up the entire lobby. "You look very handsome. Ready for the real Barbados experience?" "Ready," Dylan replied, though he wondered if anyone could ever be truly ready for someone like Amelia King. She led him outside where a small rental car waited, its windows down to catch the Caribbean breeze. "I thought we'd start with something most tourists never see. The fishing village where my grandmother grew up. It's where I learned that the ocean connects everything and everyone." As they drove through the narrow roads lined with chattel houses painted in bright Caribbean colors, Amelia shared stories of her childhood, her family, the traditions that shaped her worldview. Dylan found himself completely captivated, not just by her beauty, but by her perspective on life, her deep connection to place and heritage, her ability to find meaning in simple moments. "Tell me about aviation," she said as they walked along a secluded beach where local fishermen were bringing in their evening catch. "Not the technical parts. Anyone can learn those. Tell me why you love to fly." Dylan paused, surprised by the depth of her question. Most people wanted to know about exotic destinations or dramatic weather events, but Amelia was asking about the soul of flying. "When I'm up there," he said slowly, looking out at the Caribbean seas stretching endlessly toward the horizon, "everything makes sense. The complexity of life simplifies into physics and beauty. Wind currents and weather patterns become almost musical. And there's this moment, right after takeoff, when you break through the cloud layer, and suddenly everything is crystal clear and infinite." Amelia listened with complete attention, her dark eyes reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. "That's how I feel about the ocean," she said softly. "Papa taught me to see it not as a barrier between islands, but as the road that connects our whole Caribbean family. Every wave carries stories from one island to another." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, their feet leaving parallel tracks in the wet sand, when Dylan stumbled slightly on an uneven section of beach. Amelia instinctively reached out to steady him, her hand warm and sure on his arm. The contact sent electricity shooting through his nervous system, and he found himself covering her hand with his own. "Thank you," he said, his voice rougher than intended, but he didn't immediately let go of her hand, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she looked up at him with an expression that was part curiosity, part recognition, and entirely too dangerous for his peace of mind. "Captain Dylan," she said softly, using his first name for the first time. "Can I ask you something personal?" Dylan nodded, though every instinct warned him that personal questions from Amelia King were likely to shatter what remained of his professional composure. "What happened to make you so careful about letting people close?" The question hit him like turbulence at 30,000 feet. Unexpected and powerful enough to shift everything. He looked into her perceptive eyes and realized she'd seen past his professional demeanor to the carefully guarded pain underneath. "I lost someone," he said finally. the words coming easier than they had in years. Her name was Sarah. She was young, 28. We were engaged, planning our future, and then one night a drunk driver. He stopped, surprised by how much he'd revealed. Amelia's expression filled with understanding and compassion. "I'm so sorry," she said simply, her hand still warm on his arm. "That kind of loss, it changes how you see everything." "It made me realize how fragile life is," Dylan continued, drawn by her genuine empathy to share more than he'd intended. "How quickly everything you think is solid can disappear. I've been careful ever since. Maybe too careful." "Papa always says that being careful with your heart is wise," Amelia replied thoughtfully. "But building walls so high that love can't find you, that's not living, that's just surviving." Her words hit him with unexpected force. 6 years of survival disguised as living, was that what he'd been doing? Building walls so high that he'd forgotten what it felt like to want someone, to feel truly alive in another person's presence. "You're very wise for 24, he said, attempting lightness but hearing the emotion in his own voice. Amelia's smile was gentle but pointed. "Age isn't about numbers, Captain Dylan. It's about what life has taught you, and how you choose to use those lessons. I may be 24, but I've been flying since I was 5 years old, sitting in Papa's cockpit, learning that trust and communication are everything. I've seen enough of the world to know that real connection is rare and precious." They'd stopped walking, standing close enough that Dylan could see the golden flecks in her dark eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from her skin in the tropical evening air. The sound of waves yapping against the shore provided a rhythmic backdrop to the moment, and Dylan realized that something fundamental was shifting between them. Professional distance, giving way to personal recognition. "Amelia," he said quietly, her name sounding different in his voice now, warmer and more intimate. "This is complicated." "The best things usually are," she replied, stepping slightly closer. "But complicated doesn't mean wrong." Dylan felt his carefully maintained control beginning to crack. Everything about this moment, the romantic setting, her beauty, the emotional honesty they'd shared, pushed against 6 years of careful isolation. But it was more than attraction. It was recognition, as if some part of his soul had been waiting for this young woman with her Caribbean warmth and aviation dreams. "Company policy," he said weakly, grasping for the professional boundaries that seemed increasingly irrelevant. "It's about crew members on the same aircraft," Amelia replied with a small smile. "But we're not on an aircraft right now. Right now we're just Dylan and Amelia, standing on a beach in Barbados, getting to know each other as people." She was right, and they both knew it. The policies, the age gap, the professional complications, all of it faded against the simple truth of two people drawn together by something neither fully understood, but both felt deeply. "Just Dylan and Amelia," he repeated softly, testing how it felt to set aside the captain's authority and simply be a man interested in an extraordinary woman. "Just two people who understand that flying isn't just about getting from one place to another," Amelia added, her voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "It's about trust, communication, and the courage to navigate towards something beautiful, even when you can't see the destination clearly." The metaphor wasn't lost on either of them. Dylan reached up slowly, giving her every opportunity to step away, and gently touched her cheek. Her skin was warm and soft, and she leaned into his touch with a small sigh that made his heart race. "Amelia," he said again, her name becoming a question, a promise, a recognition of the line they were about to cross. "Yes," she whispered, understanding perfectly. Yes to all of it. When he kissed her, it was with the gentle reverence of a man who'd forgotten what it felt like to want someone this much. Her lips were soft and warm, and she tasted like tropical sunshine and infinite possibilities. The kiss started tender, but deepened as she responded, her arms sliding around his neck, her body pressing closer to his with a naturalness that felt like coming home. The Caribbean sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold around them, and the sound of waves provided nature's own symphony for their first kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dylan rested his forehead against hers, overwhelmed by the intensity of what he felt. "This is going to change everything," he said softly. "I know," Amelia replied, her fingers still tangled in his hair. "Are you scared?" Dylan considered the question honestly. 6 years of careful isolation, company policies, professional reputations, the age gap that couldn't be ignored. There were a dozen reasons to be terrified. But looking into her eyes, feeling the rightness of her in his arms, he found only one answer. "Terrified," he admitted with a rueful smile. "And more alive than I've felt in years." Amelia's responding smile was radiant. "Good. The best flights are always a little scary at takeoff." As they walked back along the beach hand in hand, the lights of Bridgetown twinkling in the distance, Dylan realized that his carefully ordered world had just encountered a force that would reshape everything. But for the first time in 6 years, the prospect of change felt less like a threat and more like the beginning of an adventure he'd been waiting his whole life to take. What do you think about love that crosses boundaries others set for us? Have you ever felt that instant recognition when you meet someone who just fits? Share your thoughts about age being just a number when two souls truly connect. I'd love to hear your experiences with unexpected connections. I had you on a trip just yesterday. The weeks that followed their Barbados evening transformed routine flights into stolen moments of connection, wrapped in professional efficiency. Dylan and Amelia had crossed a line on that Caribbean beach, but returning to Miami meant navigating the complex reality of company policies, professional relationships, and the careful dance of hearts learning to trust again. Weather reports began tracking Hurricane Elena's formation off the African coast 3 weeks after their first kiss. But neither Dylan nor Amelia paid much attention to the distant storm system. They were too focused on the tempest building between them, professional excellence that masked growing personal intimacy, stolen glances during crew briefings, and the electric charge that passed between them every time their hands accidentally touched during routine operations. Their second flight together, Miami to Bridgetown 3 days later, crackled with unspoken tension. Every routine interaction carried deeper meaning. The way Amelia's fingers lingered when she handed him the passenger manifest. How Dylan's voice softened imperceptibly when speaking to her over the intercom. The electric charge that passed between them during crew briefings. "Captain," Amelia said during their pre-flight safety check, her professional tone not quite hiding the warmth in her eyes. "I've prepared a cultural briefing for the crew about Caribbean funeral traditions. We have several passengers traveling for a memorial service." Dylan looked up from his clipboard to find her standing closer than strictly necessary. Close enough that he caught the subtle scent of her perfume and felt the familiar flutter in his chest that her presence always triggered. "That's thoughtful," he replied, his voice rougher than intended. "Your cultural insights make a real difference to passenger experience. It's important to honor people's journeys," she said softly, her gaze holding his for a moment longer than professional protocol suggested. Whether they're celebrating or grieving, flying toward love or leaving it behind, we carry more than just bodies from place to place. The profundity of her words, the way she saw their work as sacred service rather than simple transportation, struck Dylan with unexpected force. Here was someone who understood that aviation was about human connection, about the stories that unfold at 35,000 feet. "Miss King," came Chief Purser Francine's authoritative voice from across the galley. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" Dylan watched Amelia's posture shift slightly, becoming more formal as she moved toward Francine. He couldn't hear their conversation, but Francine's expression suggested professional concern, and Dylan felt a chill of worry about company policies and workplace relationships. 20 minutes into the flight, Dylan made his routine cabin walk and found Amelia in the aft galley, her usual radiant confidence dimmed by something that looked like concern. "Everything all right?" he asked quietly, glancing around to ensure they were alone. Amelia's smile was strained. "Chief Purser Deepwater is observant. She mentioned that crew cohesion is important and that personal relationships can complicate professional dynamics." Dylan felt his stomach drop. "Did she specifically mention us?" "Not directly," Amelia replied, her melodic accent tight with worry. But she did say that new crew members are closely monitored during their probationary period, and that any complications could affect permanent placement. The implication was clear. Their growing connection hadn't gone unnoticed, and Amelia's career could be at risk before it truly began. Dylan felt the familiar weight of protective instincts, the same drive that had made him want to shield Sarah from every possible harm. "Maybe we should," he began, but Amelia interrupted him with a gentle touch on his arm. "Don't," she said firmly, her Caribbean strength shining through the worry. "Don't make decisions for me based on fear. I'm not some fragile thing that needs protecting from consequences." Her words stopped him cold. She was right. He was falling into old patterns, letting his protective instincts override her agency. But the age gap, her probationary status, the professional risks, how could he not worry? "I'm not trying to protect you from consequences," Dylan said carefully. "I'm trying to understand if pursuing this is fair to your career goals." Amelia's expression softened, recognizing his genuine concern. "Captain Dylan," she said, using the intimate form of address they developed. "In Caribbean culture, we have a saying. Don't let fear of falling keep you from learning to fly. I've wanted this career my whole life, but I won't let that fear keep me from exploring something that could be equally beautiful." Before Dylan could respond, Jennifer Adamson appeared in the galley entrance. "Sorry to interrupt, but we've got a passenger situation in business class that needs captain's attention." The interruption forced them back into professional roles. But Dylan carried Amelia's words with him for the rest of the flight. Her courage, her refusal to be protected from her own choices, her mature understanding of risk and reward. All of it reinforced his growing recognition that age was indeed just a number when it came to the depth of her character. Their third flight together, 2 weeks later, brought unexpected challenges that tested both their professional partnership and their developing personal connection. The Miami to Bridgetown route encountered severe weather over the Windward Islands, requiring course deviations and careful navigation through towering thunderheads that painted the Caribbean sky in dramatic shades of purple and gold. "Ladies and gentlemen," from the flight deck, Dylan's calm voice filled the cabin as they navigated through the turbulence. "We're experiencing some weather-related bumps as we route around stowing systems. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened, and our cabin crew will suspend service until we reach smoother air." In the cabin, Amelia moved through the aisles with practiced grace, despite the aircraft's movement, checking on nervous passengers and offering reassurance in both English and Bajan. Dylan watched through the cockpit monitors, impressed by her natural ability to project calm confidence even as the aircraft pitched and rolled through the unstable air. "She's good," First Officer Jake Peters commented, following Dylan's gaze. "Natural instinct for passenger management. Reminds me of the Caribbean crew members I've flown with. They understand that taking care of people is as important as following procedures." Dylan nodded, but his attention was focused on one particular passenger interaction. An elderly Barbadian man in seat 14C was clearly distressed by the turbulence, and Amelia had knelt beside his seat despite the aircraft's movement. Even without audio, Dylan could see her speaking earnestly to the man, her hand resting gently on his arm in a gesture of comfort and cultural connection. "Tower, Atlantic 447. Dylan radioed to Barbados Approach Control, requesting direct routing to Beacon intersection when able, for passenger comfort. Atlantic 447, approved direct Beacon when clear of weather cells, maintain flight level 350. As they broke through the worst of the turbulence into smooth Caribbean air, Dylan felt the familiar satisfaction of a challenging navigation successfully completed. But his attention was immediately drawn to movement in the cabin. Amelia was assisting the same elderly passenger, who appeared to be having some kind of medical episode. "Captain," came Jennifer's voice over the intercom, "we need you in the cabin, passenger medical emergency." Dylan engaged the autopilot and made his way aft, finding Amelia kneeling beside the elderly man's seat, speaking to him in rapid, soothing Bajan, while monitoring his pulse with practiced competence. "Mr. Allen is having chest pains," she reported professionally, but Dylan caught the concern in her eyes. He was already stressed by the turbulence, and I think the weather upset triggered something more serious. Dylan knelt beside them, immediately impressed by Amelia's calm competence. She'd already administered oxygen, positioned the passenger for optimal breathing, and gathered vital signs with the efficiency of someone trained in emergency medical response. "Mr. Alleyne," Dylan said gently, "I'm Captain Hartwell. We're going to take excellent care of you. How are you feeling now?" "Better, Captain," the man replied weakly, his Bajan accent thick with emotion. "This young lady, she been talking to me like family. Make me feel safe." Dylan glanced at Amelia, seeing pride and concern warring in her expression. She'd gone beyond standard medical protocols to provide cultural comfort, understanding that for Caribbean passengers, feeling connected to home and family was as important as clinical care. "Miss King," Dylan said formally, acutely aware that other passengers and crew were watching. "Excellent work. Continue monitoring while I coordinate with medical and prepare for possible diversion." But as their eyes met over Mr. Alleyne's still form, the professional distance dissolved into something far more personal. In that moment, Dylan saw not just her competence, but her compassion, her ability to blend technical skill with human warmth. And something shifted in his chest, a recognition that this young woman possessed exactly the kind of strength and wisdom he'd want beside him in any crisis. "Thank you, Captain," Amelia replied softly, but her eyes said much more. They said she understood the significance of his trust, the way he'd deferred to her judgment in front of the entire cabin. They said she recognized this as a moment of professional partnership that transcended their personal attraction. Mr. Alleyne's condition stabilized during the final hour of flight, and he was met by medical personnel upon landing in Bridgetown. But the real impact of the emergency was the way it had demonstrated Dylan and Amelia's professional partnership. Seamless communication, complementary skills, shared commitment to passenger welfare that elevated both their individual performances. "Excellent work today," Dylan told Amelia, as they completed post-flight procedures. They were alone in the aircraft, the last passengers having departed into the warm Barbados evening. "Your cultural awareness and medical training made the difference for Mr. Alleyne." "We made the difference," Amelia corrected gently. "Your decision to trust my assessment, to support my approach even when other crew members might have questioned it, that created the environment where I could do my best work." Dylan felt something warm unfurl in his chest at her words. She was right. They had worked together seamlessly, each enhancing the other's strengths. But more than that, she'd given him credit for supporting her judgment, recognizing the leap of faith it represented in front of the entire crew. "You continue to surprise me," he said honestly, studying her face in the golden light filtering through the aircraft windows. "Your competence, your wisdom, your ability to see beyond procedures to human needs, it's remarkable." Amelia's smile was radiant, but tinged with something more complex. "Is it remarkable, or is it just what you expected to find when you looked past the age on my personnel file?" Her question hit him like turbulence at altitude, unexpected and powerful enough to shift everything. She was challenging him to examine his own assumptions, to recognize that his surprise at her capabilities might reflect his own prejudices about youth and experience. "You're right," Dylan admitted, feeling something shift in how he saw not just her, but their entire dynamic. "I've been so focused on the age gap that I almost missed the person. And the person I'm getting to know is extraordinary by any measure." 24 years old and extraordinary? Amelia teased gently, but there was serious intent behind her playful tone. 24 years old and extraordinary, Dylan confirmed without hesitation. "Age is just data, Amelia. Character is what matters, and yours is exceptional." They stood in the quiet aircraft, surrounded by the sense of tropical air and the distant sounds of Caribbean ground operations. The evening light painted everything in shades of gold and coral, and Dylan realized that something fundamental had shifted during their emergency response. They'd moved from attraction, complicated by age concerns, to recognition of genuine partnership. "Captain Dylan," Amelia said softly, stepping closer in the intimate space of the empty cabin, "would you like to have dinner with me tonight? Not as captain and crew member, but as Dylan and Amelia." Dylan felt his pulse quicken at the invitation and everything it implied. Professional boundaries, company policies, the complications that came with pursuing someone he supervised, all of it paled against the simple truth that he wanted to spend time with this remarkable woman who'd just demonstrated the kind of grace under pressure that defined true partnerships. "I'd like that very much," he said quietly. Where would you like to go? Amelia's smile was mischievous and full of promise. Let me show you where Bajans really eat. Not hotel restaurants or tourist spots. The place where families gather and stories are shared. But I should warn you, she added with a laugh, my Aunt Marva will probably interrogate you about your intentions. Dylan chuckled, charmed by her family-oriented culture and the prospect of meeting people who mattered to her. I think I can handle Caribbean family interrogation. We'll see about that, Amelia replied with a grin. Aunt Marva has been protecting King family honor for 60 years. She takes no prisoners. As they walked off the aircraft, together, into the warm Barbados evening, Dylan felt a sense of anticipation, unlike anything he'd experienced in years. This wasn't just about attraction, or even professional respect. It was about discovering what happened when two people who understood the sky decided to explore the ground they might build together. The complications remained. Company policies didn't disappear because of successful emergency responses, and age gaps didn't become irrelevant because of shared competence. But for the first time since Sarah's death, Dylan found himself willing to navigate difficult terrain for the chance to explore something that felt increasingly like destiny. 3 weeks into their professional partnership, Dylan and Amelia had developed a rhythm that blended seamless workplace efficiency with carefully hidden personal connection. Their flights together had become studies in professional excellence, passenger commendations, crew cooperation that impressed even Chief Purser Francine, and a shared approach to aviation service that honored both American efficiency and Caribbean warmth. But beneath the professional surface, their personal connection deepened with each shared conversation, each stolen moment, each glimpse into the other's character that revealed new layers of compatibility. Dylan found himself looking forward to their flights, with an anticipation that had nothing to do with destinations and everything to do with the woman who'd transformed routine operations into adventures of the heart. Their breakthrough came during a layover in Miami, when Hurricane Elena had strengthened into a major storm with projected paths that would affect all Caribbean operations for the next 48 hours. Meteorologists tracked her movement with the focused intensity that marked potentially devastating weather systems, and Dylan found himself torn between professional concern for operational disruptions and personal anticipation of extended time with Amelia. All flights to the Caribbean are grounded until Elena's path becomes clearer. Operations Manager Robert Chen announced to the assembled crews, satellite imagery of the massive storm system displayed on screens throughout the operations center. Current projections show a Category 3 hurricane with winds up to 125 miles per hour. We're looking at a minimum 48-hour hold, possibly longer, depending on storm development and tracking. Dylan felt a mixture of professional disappointment and personal anticipation. Grounded flights meant disrupted schedules and passenger inconvenience, but they also meant extended time in Miami with Amelia, time away from the professional constraints that governed their interactions at 35,000 feet. Captain Hartwell, Amelia appeared beside him as crews dispersed toward transportation to crew hotels. Looks like Hurricane Elena has other plans for us. 48 hours minimum, Dylan confirmed, studying her expression for any sign of disappointment. Instead, he found something that looked remarkably like pleased anticipation. Well, she said with a smile that made his pulse quicken, I suppose we'll have to find ways to occupy ourselves while we wait for the storm to pass. Dylan caught the subtle invitation in her tone and felt heat spike through his nervous system. 48 hours with Amelia, away from aircraft and crew schedules, and the professional distance they maintained in front of colleagues. The possibilities were both thrilling and terrifying. I have an apartment here in Miami, he found himself saying, the words coming out before he can second-guess them. If you'd prefer privacy, to ride out the storm instead of the crew hotel. Amelia's eyes widened slightly, recognizing the significance of his invitation. His apartment represented personal space, intimacy, the crossing of boundaries they'd been carefully maintaining. But her smile never wavered. I'd like that, she said softly, her melodic accent wrapping around the words like a caress. I'd like that very much. The drive to Dylan's Coconut Grove apartment passed in comfortable conversation about the storm, about flying, about the strange twist of fate that had grounded them together, But underneath the easy talk, both felt the electric anticipation of time alone together, of boundaries about to be crossed, of professional distance finally giving way to personal truth. Dylan's apartment reflected his personality. Clean lines, aviation memorabilia, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Biscayne Bay that captured both sunrise and sunset in their journey across Miami skies. But what struck Amelia immediately was how sterile it felt, as if someone lived there without truly inhabiting the space. "This is beautiful," she said, moving to the windows, where the late afternoon light painted the bay in shades of gold and turquoise. "But it feels like a hotel suite. Where's the personal touch, the things that make it home?" Dylan felt a familiar tightness in his chest as he recognized the accuracy of her observation. 6 years of careful emotional distance had extended to his living space. Functional, but not personal. Comfortable, but not warm. Sarah's things had been carefully stored away after her death, and he'd never quite filled the emotional vacuum they'd left behind. "I'm not home very often," he said quietly, joining her at the windows. "Flying keeps me busy." Amelia turned to study his face, her perceptive eyes seeing past his casual explanation to the deeper truth. "Or maybe home stopped feeling like home when you lost Sarah, and you've been living in a way station ever since." Her insight hit him with the force of Caribbean wind, direct, powerful, impossible to ignore. She was right, and they both knew it. His apartment, like his heart, had become a carefully maintained space where nothing personal could take root deeply enough to cause pain if it were lost. "You see too much," Dylan said softly, but without defensiveness. Her understanding felt like gift rather than intrusion. "I see someone who's been surviving instead of living," Amelia replied gently, moving closer to him at the window. "Someone who's afraid that caring deeply means risking deeply." Dylan felt something crack in his chest, not painful, but like ice breaking up after a long winter. "And what do you see when you look at us? At this?" He gestured between them, encompassing their professional partnership, their growing attraction, the age gap that couldn't be ignored. Amelia stepped closer, close enough that he could see the golden flecks in her dark eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from her skin in the humid Miami air. "I see two people who understand the sky," she said softly, "who know that the most beautiful flights happen when you're brave enough to navigate towards something you can't see clearly, but know in your heart is worth reaching." Her metaphor wasn't lost on him. Flying by instruments through clouds, trusting navigation systems, and experience when visual references disappeared. It was the aviation equivalent of love, of faith, of choosing to move towards something meaningful despite uncertainty. "Amelia," he said quietly, her name carrying all the weight of recognition, desire, and the last threads of his resistance to what was happening between them. "Dylan," she replied, using his first name with intimate familiarity that sent heat spiraling through his nervous system. "Stop thinking like a captain for a few hours. Stop worrying about policies and age gaps and professional complications. Just be Dylan, here with me, while Hurricane Elena reminds us that some forces are bigger than the rules we make." As if summoned by her words, the first bands of outer storm winds rattled the apartment windows, and rain began to streak the glass overlooking the bay. The weather provided perfect metaphor for what was happening between them. A natural force that couldn't be controlled, only experienced and navigated with skill and courage. Dylan reached up slowly, giving her every opportunity to step away, and cupped her face in his hands. Her skin was warm and soft, and she leaned into his touch with a small sigh that made his heart race. "I'm scared," he admitted honestly, his thumbs tracing the high arch of her cheekbones. "Not of you, but of how much I want this, how much I want you." "I'm scared too," Amelia whispered, her hands coming up to cover his. "But I'm more scared of missing this chance, of letting fear keep us from discovering what we could be together." When Dylan kissed her this time, it was with the desperate honesty of a man who'd been holding back too long. Her lips were soft and warm and perfect, and she responded with a passion that matched his own, her arms sliding around his neck as she pressed closer against him. The kiss deepened quickly, 6 weeks of professional restraint and careful distance dissolving into heat and need and the recognition that some connections transcended every barrier society placed in their path. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dylan rested his forehead against hers, overwhelmed by the intensity of what he felt. "This changes everything," he said softly, echoing their first kiss in Barbados. "I know," Amelia replied, her fingers tangled in his hair. "Are you ready for everything to change?" Outside, Hurricane Elena continued to build strength, and Dylan realized that the storm battering Miami was nothing compared to the tempest this extraordinary young woman had unleashed in his carefully guarded heart. But for the first time in 6 years, the prospect of emotional chaos felt less like a threat and more like the beginning of the most important flight of his life. Hurricane Elena's winds grew stronger as evening approached, rattling the windows of Dylan's apartment with increasing intensity. They'd spent the afternoon talking, sharing stories that revealed the depths beneath their professional personas. Dylan had shown Amelia photos from his Navy days, his early commercial flying career, carefully avoiding the album that contained Sarah's pictures. Amelia had shared tales of growing up in aviation royalty, the pressure and privilege of being Captain Johann King's daughter, her dreams of building bridges between cultures through her career. But as storm winds howled outside and darkness fell over Miami, the carefully maintained emotional distance between them began dissolving like morning mist over Caribbean waters. "I should cook something," Dylan said, standing near the kitchen island where they'd been sharing coffee and conversation. "The power might go out and—" "Dylan," Amelia interrupted softly, rising from the bar stool where she'd been perched. "Stop." He turned to find her watching him with an expression of gentle understanding that took his breath away. She moved toward him with that fluid grace that always captivated him, stopping close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "You're nervous," she observed, with a small smile. "Captain Dylan Hartwell, who navigates aircraft through Caribbean storms without breaking a sweat, is nervous about being alone with me." Dylan felt heat creep up his neck. "I'm not nervous about being alone with you. I'm nervous about what being alone with you does to my judgment." Amelia stepped closer, close enough that the subtle scent of her perfume, something warm and tropical that reminded him of hibiscus flowers and ocean breezes, filled his senses. "And what does it do to your judgment?" "Makes me want things I shouldn't want," Dylan replied honestly, his voice rougher than intended. "Makes me forget about company policies and age gaps and professional consequences." "Good," Amelia said simply, reaching up to touch his face with gentle fingers. "Because I want the same things." The admission hung between them like suspended lightning, electric and dangerous and impossible to ignore. Dylan covered her hand with his own, pressing her palm against his cheek, feeling the last of his resistance crumble under the weight of 6 weeks of suppressed attraction and growing love. "Amelia," he said quietly, her name carrying all the warning and desire and desperate honesty he couldn't quite voice. "I know," she whispered, understanding perfectly. "I know about the risks, the complications, everything we're supposed to be careful about. But Dylan, some things are worth the risk." Outside, Hurricane Elena's winds reached their first crescendo, and rain lashed against the windows with tropical fury. The storm provided perfect soundtrack for the tempest building between them. Natural forces that demanded acknowledgement, that couldn't be controlled or contained by human rules and regulations. Dylan turned his hand to capture hers, threading their fingers together, in a gesture that felt both innocent and profoundly intimate. "If we do this," he said softly, "there's no going back. Everything changes, how we work together, how we navigate company policies, how we love each other," Amelia finished gently, using the word they'd both been avoiding. "Because that's what this is, isn't it? Not just attraction or professional respect or cultural fascination. This is love." The words settled between them with the weight of truth finally spoken. Dylan felt something fundamental shift in his chest. Not the painful crack of old wounds reopening, but the expansive warmth of a heart learning to hope again. "Yes," he admitted, the word coming out rough with emotion. "This is love. Complicated, inappropriate, career-threatening love that I never saw coming and can't seem to stop. Amelia's smile was radiant. I love you too, she said simply. I love your strength and your gentleness, your dedication to keeping people safe, the way you see past my age to who I really am. I love how you make me feel like an equal partner, even when the whole world wants to see me as just a young girl playing at adult careers. Dylan felt his throat tighten with emotion at her words. She understood the struggle to be taken seriously, the burden of others' expectations, the courage it took to claim your place in spaces where you weren't automatically welcomed. Their circumstances were different, but the emotional landscape was remarkably similar. You're my equal, Dylan said with quiet intensity, pulling her closer until there was barely space between them. In every way that matters, intelligence, compassion, professional competence, strength of character. Age is just data, Amelia. What we have together transcends numbers. Thunder crashed overhead as if nature itself was applauding his declaration, and Amelia rose on her toes to kiss him with a passion that made their previous kisses seem tentative by comparison. This kiss carried the weight of love acknowledged, barriers dissolved, futures chosen despite uncertainty. Dylan responded with equal intensity, his arms sliding around her waist to pull her against him, feeling the perfect way her curves fitted against his body. She was warm and soft and strong, all at once, and kissing her felt like coming home after years of wandering in emotional wilderness. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Dylan rested his forehead against hers, overwhelmed by the intensity of what he felt. Amelia, he whispered, her name a prayer and a promise. Take me to your bedroom, she said softly, her melodic accent wrapping around the words like silk. Make love to me while Hurricane Elena reminds us that some forces are stronger than any rules humans make. Dylan felt heat spike through his entire nervous system at her words, at the open invitation in her dark eyes, at the recognition that they were about to cross the final boundary between professional colleagues and intimate partners. Are you sure? He asked, giving her one last opportunity to step back from the precipice they were approaching. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Amelia replied with quiet conviction. I want you, Dylan. All of you. I want to show you what love feels like when someone chooses you, not despite your scars, but because of the strength they represent. Her words shattered the last of his resistance. Dylan swept her into his arms, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him, how natural it felt to carry her toward his bedroom, while storm winds provided nature's own symphony for their union. The bedroom was softly lit by the warm glow of Miami's storm-dimmed skyline, rain streaking the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the bay. Dylan set Amelia gently on her feet beside the bed, his hands trembling slightly as he cupped her face. I want to love you properly, he said softly, his thumbs tracing the elegant line of her cheekbones, slowly, completely, with all the reverence you deserve. Amelia's smile was tender and full of trust. Then love me, she whispered. Love me like the gift this is, two hearts finding each other across every barrier that should have kept us apart. Dylan kissed her again, pouring 6 weeks of suppressed longing into the contact, feeling her respond with equal passion. His hands moved to the buttons of her blouse, fingers steady, despite the emotion coursing through him, revealing the smooth expanse of her mahogany skin inch by precious inch. You're beautiful, he murmured against her lips, his voice rough with wonder and desire. So incredibly beautiful. Amelia's hands worked at his shirt with equal reverence, her touch leaving trails of fire across his skin. You make me feel beautiful, she replied softly. You make me feel seen, valued, loved for exactly who I am. When they came together on the soft sheets of his bed, it was with the tender intensity of two souls recognizing their perfect match. Dylan worshipped her body with gentle hands and reverent kisses, learning the places that made her sigh with pleasure, discovering the language only hearts could speak. Amelia responded with equal giving, her touch healing wounds he'd carried for 6 years, her whispered words of love and acceptance, writing new stories over old scars. Their lovemaking was a conversation in touches and sighs, a dance of giving and receiving that transcended physical connection to become something approaching the sacred. "Dylan," she whispered, as they moved together in perfect rhythm, her voice thick with emotion and desire. "I love you completely." "I love you too," he replied, his voice breaking with the weight of truth, finally spoken without reservation. "More than I thought I could ever love anyone again." Outside, Hurricane Elena reached its full fury, winds howling around the building with tropical intensity. But inside Dylan's bedroom, wrapped in each other's arms, they created their own perfect storm of passion and tenderness, of love that transcended every boundary society had tried to place between them. When they finally collapsed together, breathing hard and hearts racing in synchronization, Dylan pulled Amelia against his chest, marveling at how perfectly she fitted in his arms, how right this felt despite every reason it should be complicated. "No regrets?" he asked softly, pressing a kiss to the top of her head, where her hair smelled like tropical flowers and rain. "Only one," Amelia replied, tilting her head to look at him, with eyes still soft with satisfaction and love. Dylan felt his heart skip with concern. "What?" Her smile was mischievous and tender. "That it took Hurricane Elena to get us here. We could have been loving each other like this for weeks." Dylan's laughter was rich with relief and joy. "We needed time to be sure. This isn't just physical attraction, Amelia. This is everything. Partnership, friendship, love, a future I never thought I'd want again. A future that includes navigating company policies and my father's protective instincts and the opinions of people who think age gaps define the validity of love," Amelia said thoughtfully, tracing patterns on his chest with gentle fingers. "All of that," Dylan agreed. "Are you ready for the complications?" Amelia propped herself up on his chest, her dark eyes serious but determined. "Dylan, I've been navigating complications my entire life. Being Captain King's daughter in Caribbean aviation, being a young black woman in international airline service, carrying family legacy while building my own identity. I know how to handle people who think they know what's best for me better than I do." Dylan felt a surge of admiration for her strength and clarity. "And what do you know is best for you?" "This," she said simply, leaning down to kiss him softly. "You. Us. Love that's built on mutual respect, shared values, and the kind of partnership that makes both people stronger. Even if it means professional complications, Amelia confirmed, because Dylan, what we have together isn't just love, it's the kind of love that enhances everything else we do. Our teamwork today during Mr. Allen's emergency proof that we don't just love each other, we make each other better at everything that matters." Dylan felt something settle in his chest, not the resignation of someone accepting difficult circumstances, but the peace of someone who'd found something worth fighting for. "Then we navigate it together," he said quietly. "Whatever comes next, we face it as partners." "Partners in everything," Amelia agreed, settling back against his chest with a satisfied sigh. "Professional excellence, personal love, and whatever storms the future brings our way." Outside, Hurricane Elena continued her dance across South Florida, but her winds were beginning to diminish, the worst of the storm moving past them toward the open Atlantic. Dylan held Amelia close, listening to her breathing settle into the rhythm of approaching sleep, feeling more at peace than he had in 6 years. Tomorrow would bring the return to professional protocols, the careful navigation of company policies, the complex dance of maintaining their careers while nurturing their love. But tonight, with storm winds as their symphony and love as their sanctuary, they'd found something that transcended every barrier the world might place between them. "Dylan?" Amelia's voice was soft with approaching sleep. "Huh? When we fly together tomorrow, everything will be different." "I know," he replied, pressing another kiss to her hair. "Better. Everything will be better." As Hurricane Elena moved out to sea and Miami settled into the calm that followed storms, Dylan and Amelia slept wrapped in each other's arms, their hearts beating in synchronization, their futures intertwined like fingers clasped in perfect trust. Dawn broke clear and bright over Miami. Hurricane Elena, having moved on to leave behind crystal skies and air so clean it seemed to sparkle. Dylan woke slowly, immediately aware of the warm weight of Amelia, curled against his side, her head pillowed on his chest, her hair spread across his skin like silk. For a moment, he simply enjoyed the peace of holding her, the rightness of waking up with someone he loved, the knowledge that everything had indeed changed between them. But as consciousness fully returned, so did awareness of the complex reality they'd have to navigate. "Good morning," Amelia murmured against his chest, her voice husky with sleep and contentment. "Good morning, beautiful," Dylan replied, tightening his arms around her. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in weeks," she said honestly, lifting her head to look at him with eyes still soft from sleep, but bright with happiness. "You?" "Like I was exactly where I belonged," Dylan answered, reaching up to brush a strand of hair from her face. "Which I was." Amelia's smile was radiant, but Dylan caught something else in her expression, awareness of the day ahead, of the return to professional roles and company policies and the careful dance they'd have to perform. "We should talk about today," she said gently, reading his thoughts with the accuracy that marked their growing partnership. "How we handle being Captain Hartwell and Ms. King after being Dylan and Amelia." Dylan appreciated her directness, her refusal to pretend that love existed in a vacuum separate from professional reality. "What are your thoughts?" "Professional excellence becomes even more important now," Amelia said thoughtfully, settling more comfortably against him while keeping their conversation serious. "We can't give Chief Purser Deepwater or anyone else reason to question our competence based on personal relationships." "Agreed," Dylan said. "Our work has to be beyond reproach." "And we need to be honest about disclosure requirements," Amelia continued. "I know company policy requires reporting relationships between crew members, especially captain-subordinate relationships." Dylan felt a familiar tightness in his chest at the mention of company policies, but Amelia's matter-of-fact approach helped him focus on practical solutions rather than emotional complications. "The policy allows for disclosure and potential reassignment," he said carefully. "It doesn't automatically mean termination, but it could affect our ability to fly together. Then we make sure our professional performance is so exemplary that the company sees our partnership as an asset rather than a liability." Amelia replied with quiet determination. "And we prepare for the possibility that we might have to prove our love is worth whatever professional adjustments are required." Dylan felt a surge of admiration for her mature approach to their situation. She wasn't minimizing the complications or pretending love conquered all practical considerations, but she wasn't letting those complications diminish her commitment either. "You continue to amaze me," he said softly, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Your strength, your wisdom, your ability to see solutions where others might only see problems." "I learned from the best," Amelia replied with a smile. "Papa always taught me that Caribbean waters require skilled navigation, but they're also the most beautiful sailing in the world. You just have to be brave enough to handle the complexity." Before Dylan could respond, his phone buzzed with a text message from Atlantic Airways Operations. "All crew report for duty at 1400 hours. Caribbean routes resuming normal operations." "Back to reality," Dylan said, showing Amelia the message. "No," she corrected gently, rising up to kiss him with tender intensity. "Forward to reality. Our reality, where love and professionalism coexist, where partnerships enhance rather than compromise excellence, where two hearts that found each other refuse to let policies and procedures diminish what they've built." Dylan felt something settle in his chest at her words, not resignation, but resolution. Not fear, but determination to protect and nurture what they'd discovered together. "Forward to our reality," he agreed, pulling her close for another kiss that tasted like promises and new beginnings. "Whatever that looks like." As they prepared for their return to professional duties, Dylan couldn't help but notice how naturally they moved around each other, how domestic intimacy enhanced rather than competed with their individual strengths. Watching Amelia prepare for their flight, seeing her professional competence now complemented by the glow of love fulfilled, Dylan realized that Hurricane Elena had done more than ground their aircraft. It had cleared the air around their hearts, washing away the last barriers to a love that would change everything about how they saw their futures. The flight ahead would test their ability to maintain professional excellence while nurturing personal love. But as Dylan watched Amelia gathering her crew materials with the same meticulous care she brought to everything, he felt confident they were ready for whatever challenges their chosen path might bring. The return to Atlantic Airways operations after Hurricane Elena felt like stepping onto a stage where every gesture would be scrutinized. Dylan and Amelia arrived separately at the Miami hub, their professional masks firmly in place, but the awareness between them crackled like electricity in the recycled air of the crew briefing room. "Good afternoon, everyone," Dylan began, his authoritative captain's voice filling the space as crew members settled into their seats. "I trust everyone weathered Elena safely. Today we're resuming our Miami to Bridgetown route with a full passenger load, 295 souls on board, including several families who've been delayed by storm cancellations." As he spoke, Dylan was hyper-aware of Amelia's presence 3 seats away, the way she took notes with focused attention, how the afternoon light from the briefing room windows seemed to make her skin glow with subtle radiance. Every professional interaction carried the weight of intimate knowledge now, the memory of her whispered words of love, the feel of her skin against his, the trust she'd shown in giving herself completely to their connection. "Weather conditions are favorable post-storm," Dylan continued, forcing himself to focus on meteorological data, rather than the curve of Amelia's neck. "We'll have some residual turbulence as systems stabilize, but nothing that should affect passenger comfort significantly." Chief Purser Francine Deepwater's sharp eyes moved between Dylan and Amelia, with the calculating assessment of someone trained to notice changes in crew dynamics. "Captain Hartwell," she said, her tone professionally neutral but somehow pointed, "I trust the extended layover gave everyone adequate rest and preparation for resuming full operations?" "Absolutely," Dylan replied, meeting her gaze steadily. "The crew is well rested and ready for excellent service." But Dylan caught the way Francine's attention lingered on Amelia, noted the slight narrowing of her eyes that suggested professional suspicion. In an industry where reputations followed careers across airlines and continents, Chief Purser Deepwater had built her success on reading people and situations with laser precision. "Miss King," Francine continued, her voice carrying subtle challenge, "I'm sure the delay gave you time to reflect on your probationary period performance. Any insights to share about crew integration and professional standards?" Amelia's posture straightened almost imperceptibly, but her voice remained calm and confident. "The delay reinforced my commitment to excellence in passenger service and crew cooperation, Chief Purser. I'm grateful for the opportunity to contribute to Atlantic Airways' reputation for cultural sensitivity and operational efficiency." Dylan felt a surge of pride at her composed response, the way she'd addressed Francine's subtle probe with professional grace while subtly emphasizing her value to the operation. But he also caught the warning in Francine's expression. They were being watched, evaluated, tested. "Excellent," Francine said, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm sure your continued development will reflect positively on both your individual performance and the crew dynamic." As the briefing concluded and crew members dispersed toward their pre-flight duties, Dylan found himself walking alongside Jennifer Adamson, the senior flight attendant whose experience made her opinion valuable and potentially dangerous. "She's good," Jennifer said quietly, nodding toward Amelia as she moved efficiently through safety checks. "Natural instincts, cultural awareness, passengers respond to her like family. But Dylan..." "Yes?" Dylan kept his voice carefully neutral. "Be careful. I've seen workplace romances before, and they rarely end well for anyone involved, especially when there are significant differences in position and experience." Dylan felt heat creep up his neck at Jennifer's diplomatic reference to both his authority as captain and the age gap between him and Amelia. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Jennifer." "I'm not implying anything," she replied with gentle firmness. "I'm stating that as someone who's navigated 20 years in this industry, I recognize the signs of personal attachment that goes beyond professional respect. And I'm suggesting that you both consider the potential consequences before those signs become obvious to people who might not be as understanding as I am." The warning is delivered with kindness, but its implications were crystal clear. Their connection hadn't gone unnoticed, and if experienced crew members could see it, management attention wouldn't be far behind. A flight to Barbados tested their ability to maintain professional distance while working in perfect synchronization. Dylan found himself extra sensitive to every interaction. The way Amelia's voice softened almost imperceptibly when speaking to him over the intercom. How her fingers lingered just a heartbeat too long when handing him the passenger manifest. The careful space she maintained during cabin walks that somehow felt more intimate than if she'd stood closer. 30 minutes into the flight, a passenger in business class began experiencing what appeared to be an anxiety attack related to post-hurricane flying fears. Dylan watched through the cockpit monitors as Amelia approached the distressed woman with exactly the right combination of professional competence and personal warmth. "Mrs. Rodriguez," he heard Amelia say through the cabin audio, her melodic accent somehow soothing even over the intercom. "I understand hurricanes can make flying feel scary. My grandmother always told me that storms teach us to appreciate calm skies. Would you like me to sit with you for a few minutes?" Dylan felt his chest tighten with pride and something deeper at witnessing her natural empathy in action. She wasn't just following passenger service protocols. She was seeing past procedures to human need, offering comfort that transcended cultural and linguistic barriers. "Captain," came First Officer Peter's voice, drawing Dylan's attention back to flight operations. "You seem particularly focused on cabin management today." "Ensuring smooth operations," Dylan replied, but he could hear the defensive edge in his own voice. Jennifer's knowing look suggested she wasn't buying the professional explanation. "Right. Smooth operations. Dylan, I've been flying for 15 years, and I've seen how workplace romances usually develop. What you and Amelia have looks different. More mature, more genuinely respectful. But that doesn't make it less complicated when company policies are involved." "We're maintaining complete professionalism," Dylan replied. But even to his own ears, the protest sounded weak. "You're maintaining the appearance of professionalism," Jennifer corrected gently. "But the connection between you two is obvious to anyone who knows what to look for. And Chief Purser Deepwater definitely knows what to look for. Dylan, I like you both, and I've seen how well you work together. That's why I'm warning you. Whatever this is, you need to make decisions quickly about how to handle it before the decisions get made for you." Before Dylan could respond, Amelia's voice came over the intercom. "Captain, could you please make an announcement about expected flight conditions? Mrs. Rodriguez would benefit from hearing directly from you about safety and stability." The request was perfectly reasonable. Passenger comfort often improved when concerns were addressed by the captain's authority. But Dylan caught something else in Amelia's tone. A subtle invitation for collaboration that spoke to their growing partnership. "Ladies and gentlemen," from the flight deck, Dylan's voice filled the cabin. "We're currently experiencing smooth flying conditions at 37,000 feet. Post-hurricane weather systems have cleared completely, and we're tracking for an on-time arrival in beautiful Barbados. Our cabin crew is available for any concerns, and I want to personally assure everyone that today's conditions are ideal for comfortable flying." Through the monitor, Dylan watched Mrs. Rodriguez visibly relax at his announcement, saw Amelia's grateful smile as she continued her conversation with the nervous passenger. Their teamwork was seamless, each enhancing the other's effectiveness in ways that transcended individual competence. But he also noticed Chief Purser Francine observing the interaction with sharp attention, her expression suggesting professional evaluation that went beyond routine passenger service assessment. 2 hours into the flight, Dylan made his routine cabin walk and found Amelia in the aft galley, reviewing passenger service notes with focused concentration. For a moment, they were alone in the narrow space, surrounded by the familiar hum of aircraft systems and the distant murmur of passenger conversations. "Everything smooth back here?" Dylan asked, his captain's authority providing cover for the personal concern in his voice. "Very smooth," Amelia replied, but her smile carried warmth that had nothing to do with professional courtesy. "Mrs. Rodriguez is much better, and the Barbadian passengers are excited about homecoming. Mr. Thornton asked me to thank you again for the announcement to his grandson during our last flight." They stood closer than strictly necessary in the confined galley space, and Dylan caught the subtle scent of her perfume, the same tropical fragrance that had filled his senses during their night together. The memory of her skin against his, her whispered words of love, her complete trust and surrender hit him with unexpected intensity. "Amelia," he said quietly, her name carrying all the longing and restraint he couldn't express at 35,000 feet. "I know," she whispered, understanding perfectly. Her dark eyes held the same mixture of love and professional awareness that he felt. "Tonight, when we're just Dylan and Amelia again." The promise in her voice sent heat spiraling through his nervous system, but their intimate moment was interrupted by the approaching sound of footsteps. Jennifer Adamson appeared in the galley entrance, her expression carefully neutral, but her timing suggesting she'd observed more than coincidence. "Sorry to interrupt," Jennifer said smoothly, "but Chief Purser Deepwater is looking for you, Amelia. Passenger accommodation in first class." "Of course," Amelia replied, immediately shifting to professional mode. But as she moved past Dylan in the narrow space, her hand brushed against his arm, a contact so brief it could have been accidental. But the electricity that passed between them was unmistakably intentional. Dylan watched her walk away with that fluid grace that always captivated him. But Jennifer's presence in the galley reminded him that their connection was becoming increasingly difficult to hide from experienced observers. "Dylan," Jennifer said quietly once Amelia was out of earshot, "you're both professionals, and what you do on your own time is your business. But right now, watching you two together is like watching a lightning storm build, beautiful, powerful, and potentially destructive if it strikes in the wrong place." "We're maintaining complete professionalism," Dylan replied, but even to his own ears, the protest sounded weak. "You're maintaining the appearance of professionalism," Jennifer corrected gently, "but the connection between you two is obvious to anyone who knows what to look for. And Chief Purser Deepwater definitely knows what to look for." Dylan felt a chill of concern at the warning. Francine's reputation for protecting Atlantic Airways' interests was legendary, and crew relationships that violated company policy fell squarely within her jurisdiction. But more than that, he understood Jennifer's underlying message. Their situation was becoming unsustainable, and pretending otherwise would only make the eventual reckoning more difficult. The remainder of the flight passed with heightened awareness of every interaction, every glance, every moment that might be interpreted as unprofessional. "What are you suggesting?" he asked quietly. "I'm suggesting that whatever is happening between you two, you need to make decisions quickly about how to handle it," Jennifer replied with the firmness of someone who'd navigated similar situations. "Because the current situation, pretending nothing's changed while the tension between you could power the aircraft, isn't sustainable." As Jennifer moved away to continue her duties, Dylan stood alone in the galley, surrounded by the familiar sounds of flight operations, but feeling increasingly isolated by the complexity of his situation. He loved Amelia. That truth had become undeniable during their night together, but protecting her career, navigating company policies, and maintaining the professional excellence that defined his identity required strategies he wasn't sure he possessed. The Bridgetown layover brought unexpected complications when Captain Johann King appeared in the crew hotel lobby, his imposing presence immediately commanding attention from everyone within sight. Dylan recognized him instantly, the same confident bearing and intelligent eyes that marked Amelia's features, but magnified by decades of aviation authority and Caribbean patriarch status. "Papa." Amelia's voice carried genuine surprise and barely concealed concern as she approached her father. "I wasn't expecting you in Bridgetown." "Aviation conference wrapped up early," Captain King replied, his penetrating gaze moving from his daughter to Dylan with unmistakable assessment. "Thought I'd surprise my baby girl and meet her new captain." Dylan stepped forward, extending his hand with the respectful confidence that marked interactions between aviation professionals. "Captain King, it's an honor to meet you. I'm Captain Dylan Hartmell. Your daughter is an exceptional crew member." Captain King's handshake was firm and assessing, his dark eyes studying Dylan with the intensity of a man whose daughter's welfare was paramount. "Captain Hartwell, I've heard interesting things about Atlantic Airways' Miami Bridgetown crew dynamics. The comment was delivered with Caribbean politeness, but its implications were unmistakable. Word had somehow reached Captain King about his daughter's professional situation, and his presence suggested paternal concern that went beyond casual interest. "Papa," Amelia interjected with gentle firmness, "Captain Hartwell and I maintain exemplary professional standards. Our crew cooperation has received excellent passenger feedback." "I'm sure it has," Captain King replied, his attention never leaving Dylan's face. Professional cooperation is essential in aviation, as is understanding the cultural dynamics that shape how such cooperation is perceived by families and communities. Dylan felt the weight of cultural complexity settling around the conversation. This wasn't just about company policies or professional boundaries. It was about Caribbean family values, generational respect, and a father's protective instincts regarding his daughter's choices. "Captain King," Dylan said carefully, "I have nothing but respect for your daughter's professionalism and cultural heritage. She honors your family name in everything she does." "I'm sure she does," Captain King agreed. "The question, Captain Hartwell, is whether her professional associations honor her heritage as well." The challenge was delivered with diplomatic courtesy, but its meaning was crystal clear. Captain King was assessing whether Dylan's interest in his daughter was respectful of cultural values or merely another instance of older men viewing young Caribbean women as exotic opportunities. "Papa," Amelia said with quiet strength, "I need to speak with you privately." "Captain Hartwell, thank you for ensuring smooth operations today. I'll see you at tomorrow's briefing." Dylan recognized the dismissal for what it was: protection from a conversation that needed to happen within family boundaries. But as he watched Amelia guide her father toward the hotel's restaurant, he couldn't shake the feeling that his relationship with the most important woman in his life was about to face its most serious test. That evening, Dylan sat alone in his hotel room, staring out at the Caribbean sunset and wondering whether love was strong enough to bridge the gap between American aviation careers and Caribbean family expectations. The complications were multiplying faster than storm systems in hurricane season, and he wasn't sure he possessed the navigation skills to guide their relationship through increasingly dangerous weather. When his phone buzzed with a text from Amelia, "Need to talk. My room 1 hour." Dylan felt equal measures of anticipation and dread. Whatever conversation had taken place between father and daughter would now shape the future of everything he'd begun to hope their love might become. The flight to love, Dylan realized, was proving far more turbulent than any weather system he'd ever navigated. But as he prepared to face whatever challenges awaited, he found himself thinking of Amelia's words during Hurricane Elena. Some forces were stronger than any rules humans made, and some destinations were worth navigating toward, even when the path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty. An hour later, standing outside Amelia's hotel room door, Dylan took a deep breath and knocked, ready to discover whether their love could weather the storm of family expectations and cultural complexity that threatened to ground their relationship before it could truly take flight. Amelia opened the door, wearing a flowing sundress that complemented her rich skin tone. But Dylan immediately noticed the tension in her posture, the careful control in her expression that suggested difficult conversations and complex emotions. "Come in," she said softly, stepping aside to let him enter her hotel room. The space was identical to his own, but Amelia had somehow made it feel warmer. A scarf draped over the chair, family photos on the nightstand, the subtle scent of tropical flowers from perfume or lotion. "How did it go with your father?" Dylan asked gently, studying her face for signs of distress or resolution. Amelia sighed, moving to the window where Bridgetown's lights twinkled in the Caribbean darkness. "Papa is protective and concerned, and operating from a cultural framework that sees our situation very differently than we do." Dylan felt his stomach tighten with apprehension. "What did he say?" "He said that in Caribbean culture, older men who pursue much younger women are often viewed with suspicion," Amelia replied honestly. "That the power dynamics between a captain and crew member make genuine equality impossible. That my youth makes me vulnerable to manipulation I might not recognize." Each point hit Dylan like turbulence at altitude, unexpected and powerful enough to shake his confidence in everything he thought he understood about their relationship. "And what did you tell him?" Amelia turned from the window, her dark eyes serious but determined. I told him that you see me as an equal partner, that our relationship enhances rather than compromises my professional development, and that age gaps mean nothing when two people share values, respect, and genuine love. How did he respond to that? He asked me to prove it, Amelia said with a rueful smile, to demonstrate that what we have transcends the patterns he's seen too many times. Older men, younger women, power imbalances disguised as romance. Dylan felt something heavy settle in his chest. And how do we prove that? Amelia moved closer, her expression softening with love and determination. By being exactly who we are, Dylan. By maintaining professional excellence. By respecting cultural values. By showing that our partnership makes both of us stronger, rather than making me dependent, or you controlling. Amelia, Dylan said quietly, reaching for her hands, if your family's approval is important to you, and it should be, maybe we need to reconsider the timeline of our relationship. Take things slower, give your father time to see. No, Amelia interrupted firmly, her Caribbean strength shining through. Dylan, I won't let fear, Papa's or anyone else's, dictate how we love each other. But I also won't disrespect my family's concerns. We navigate this together with transparency and cultural sensitivity, proving that our love honors rather than threatens Caribbean values. Dylan felt a surge of admiration for her mature approach to their complicated situation. She wasn't choosing between love and family. She was insisting that real love found ways to honor both. What does that look like practically? He asked, squeezing her hands gently. It means meeting Papa properly, Amelia replied. Not as captain and crew member, but as Dylan who loves Amelia and wants to build something beautiful with her. It means showing him that you understand Caribbean family values, that you respect the importance of generational wisdom, that you see our age difference as complementary rather than problematic. Dylan felt nervous anticipation at the prospect of facing Captain King's scrutiny in a personal rather than professional context. And if he doesn't approve? Amelia's smile was gentle but uncompromising. Then we prove him wrong through how we love each other and how that love enhances everything else in our lives. But Dylan, I believe he will approve. Papa raised me to recognize genuine partnership, and what we have together is the real thing. Before Dylan could respond, Amelia's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She glanced at the screen and smiled with obvious affection. Speak of the devil. Papa wants to have breakfast with both of us tomorrow before our flight. Dylan felt his pulse quicken with nervous energy. Both of us? Both of us, Amelia confirmed, answering the call. Hi, Papa. Yes, he's here, of course. 7:30 at the hotel restaurant. We'll be there. As she ended the call, Amelia turned back to Dylan with an expression that mixed love, determination, and gentle challenge. Ready to meet my father properly? Dylan thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. 6 weeks of professional partnership, growing attraction that transcended age gaps, love discovered during Hurricane Elena. And now the ultimate test of family acceptance in Caribbean culture, where generational respect was paramount. Ready? He said, pulling her close for a kiss that tasted like promises and determination. Whatever it takes to prove that what we have together is worth fighting for. As they held each other in the quiet of her hotel room, Caribbean night sounds drifting through the windows, and tomorrow's challenges looming ahead, Dylan realized that their love story was about to face its most crucial test. But looking into Amelia's eyes, seeing the strength and commitment that marked everything she did, he felt confident they could weather whatever storms lay ahead. Some flights required more skill than others, but the most important destinations were always worth the complex navigation required to reach them safely. The hotel restaurant buzzed with the quiet efficiency of international business travelers and airline crews preparing for morning departures. But Dylan felt as if he were walking into the most important meeting of his professional life. Captain Johan King sat at a corner table overlooking the marina, his commanding presence immediately apparent even in casual clothes, pressed khakis and a polo shirt that somehow looked as authoritative as any uniform. Good morning, Papa, Amelia said warmly, kissing her father's cheek before settling into the chair beside him. Her posture was relaxed, but respectful, embodying the perfect balance of independence and family devotion that marked Caribbean daughters. Captain King, Dylan said formally, extending his hand again. "Thank you for including me in breakfast." "Captain Hartwell," Johann replied, his handshake firm and assessing. "Please, sit, and since we're discussing family matters, call me Johann. Though I suspect this conversation will determine whether family matters are indeed what we're discussing." Dylan felt the weight of cultural significance in that statement. Being invited to use Johann's first name represented conditional acceptance, but the qualification made clear that such acceptance depended entirely on what transpired in the next hour. "Papa," Amelia interjected gently, "Dylan has nothing but respect for our family and Caribbean values. I hope this conversation will give you both a chance to understand each other better." Johann's smile was warm toward his daughter, but remained evaluative toward Dylan. "That's exactly what I hope for, baby girl. Understanding is the foundation of all good relationships, professional, personal, and family." The server approached to take their breakfast orders, providing a brief respite from the emotional intensity. Dylan noticed how naturally Amelia switched between English and Bayesian when speaking to the local server, how her accent became richer and more musical when she was relaxed and among her people. Her cultural fluidity was beautiful to witness, and he felt a surge of love for this woman who moved so gracefully between worlds. "So, Captain Hartwell," Johann began once they were alone again, "tell me about your intentions regarding my daughter." The directness was typical of Caribbean patriarch conversations. No subtle probing or gradual approach. Just straightforward assessment of a man's character and motives. Dylan appreciated the honesty even as it raised his stress level. "My intentions are to love, respect, and support Amelia in achieving everything she dreams of," Dylan replied with equal directness, "both personally and professionally." "And you believe those intentions are compatible with a 20-year age gap and captain-subordinate professional relationship?" Johann's tone was neutral, but his dark eyes, so like Amelia's, missed nothing. Dylan felt the weight of the question, understanding that his answer would determine everything about their future family relationships. "I believe age is less important than compatibility, shared values, and mutual respect. And I believe our professional partnership enhances rather than compromises both our careers." "Papa," Amelia said quietly, "Dylan sees my competence, not my age. He supports my ambitions. Doesn't try to limit them. And professionally, our teamwork has received nothing but positive feedback." Johann leaned back in his chair, studying Dylan with the penetrating assessment of someone who'd spent decades evaluating people's character and motivations. "In Caribbean culture, Captain Hartwell, we have a saying, old enough to know better, young enough to do it anyway. The question is whether your relationship with my daughter represents wisdom or folly." "I hope it represents wisdom," Dylan replied honestly. "Wisdom enough to recognize when you found someone extraordinary, regardless of what others might think about age or position. Amelia makes me a better pilot, a better man, a better person. If that's folly, it's the most meaningful folly of my life." Something shifted in Johann's expression at Dylan's honesty. Not approval exactly, but recognition of genuine emotion rather than calculated response. "And what happens when company policies create problems?" Johann continued. "When professional complications threaten her career advancement? Will your love be strong enough to support her through difficulties you've created?" The question hit Dylan with unexpected force, highlighting the very real possibility that their relationship could indeed complicate Amelia's probationary period and future opportunities. But before he could respond, Amelia spoke with quiet firmness. "Papa, Dylan didn't create anything. We chose each other with full awareness of potential complications. And yes, our love is strong enough to navigate whatever challenges arise, because it's built on partnership, not dependency." Johann's attention shifted to his daughter, and Dylan caught a glimpse of pride beneath the protective concern. "You sound very certain, baby girl." "I am certain," Amelia replied with Caribbean strength. "Certain that Dylan loves me for who I am. Not what I represent. Certain that our relationship enhances my professional development rather than limiting it. Certain that love like this, built on respect, shared values, and genuine partnership, is worth fighting for." Their breakfast arrived, providing another natural pause in the intense conversation. Dylan watched the easy affection between father and daughter, noting how Johan's protective instincts were tempered by obvious respect for Amelia's judgment and maturity. "Captain Hartwell," Johan said as they began eating, "what do you know about Caribbean family values?" "I'm learning," Dylan replied honestly. "I understand that family connections are central, that generational wisdom is respected, that community approval matters. I also understand that I'm asking for acceptance into a culture where my age, my position, and my background could be seen as problematic. And how do you plan to earn that acceptance?" Dylan glanced at Amelia, drawing strength from her encouraging smile. "By proving that my love for your daughter honors rather than threatens Caribbean values. By showing respect for your family traditions while supporting her individual dreams. By demonstrating that age gaps become irrelevant when two people truly see and value each other." Johan nodded slowly, as if Dylan's response confirmed something he'd been evaluating. "And professionally, how do you handle the power dynamics of captain-crew relationships when personal feelings are involved?" "By maintaining exemplary professional standards," Dylan replied. "By ensuring that our personal relationship enhances rather than compromises our work. By being prepared to make difficult decisions if company policies require them. But doing everything possible to prove that our partnership benefits rather than threatens operational excellence." "Papa," Amelia added, "our teamwork during passenger emergencies has been exceptional. Dylan trusts my judgment, supports my decisions, treats me as an equal partner. That's not power imbalance, that's professional partnership at its best." Johan leaned forward slightly, his expression becoming more serious. "Let me tell you something about Caribbean aviation, Captain Hartwell. My daughter carries not just her own reputation, but our family name, our community's pride, our culture's representation in international aviation. When people look at Amelia King, they see possibilities for all Caribbean young women. Do you understand that responsibility?" Dylan felt the full weight of cultural expectations settling around their relationship. This wasn't just about individual love. It was about representation, about proving that Caribbean women could navigate international careers without being diminished or exploited by older, more powerful men. "I understand," Dylan said quietly, "and I want to be part of supporting that representation, not threatening it. I want our relationship to demonstrate that genuine partnership transcends age and position, that love can honor cultural values while building something new." For the first time since breakfast began, Johan's expression showed something that might have been approval. "Those are fine words, Captain Hartwell, but in Caribbean culture, we say actions speak louder than speeches. Are you prepared to prove those words through how you love my daughter?" "Every day," Dylan replied without hesitation, "for as long as she'll have me." Johan turned to his daughter, studying her face with parental intensity. "And you, baby girl, are you prepared for the challenges this relationship will bring? The questions about your judgment, the assumptions about your motivations, the extra scrutiny on everything you do." Amelia's smile was radiant but determined. "Papa, I've been preparing for extra scrutiny my entire life as Captain King's daughter. I know how to handle people who question my choices, but I also know how to recognize something extraordinary when I find it. And what Dylan and I have together is extraordinary." Johan sat back in his chair, silent for a long moment while he processed everything he'd heard and observed. Dylan felt his future hanging in the balance, understanding that this man's approval would determine whether their love could flourish within the cultural context that mattered so much to Amelia. "Captain Hartwell," Johan said finally, "I still have concerns about age gaps and power dynamics, but I also see how my daughter looks at you, how you respond to her, the respect that flows both ways. That respect matters more than age when it comes to building something lasting." Dylan felt relief flood through him, but Johan wasn't finished. However, the older man continued, his tone becoming more serious. "I want to meet with you both again in 3 months. I want to see how this relationship develops under real-world pressures. I want evidence that your love makes Amelia stronger, not dependent, that it enhances her career rather than complicating it." "Papa," Amelia said softly, reaching for her father's hand, "thank you for giving us a chance to prove what we know is true." "I'm giving you a chance to prove what you believe is true," Johan corrected gently. "Time will tell whether belief matches reality." As breakfast concluded and they prepared to return to their respective professional duties, Dylan felt cautiously optimistic about the foundation they'd established. Captain King's conditional approval represented progress, but the 3-month timeline created pressure to demonstrate their relationship's strength under professional scrutiny. "Thank you," Dylan said to Johann as they stood to leave, "for your honesty, your concerns, and your willingness to evaluate us fairly. Thank you for loving my daughter with respect," Johann replied, extending his hand again. "Now prove that respect is sustainable under pressure." The flight back to Miami carried additional weight beyond normal passenger operations. Dylan and Amelia moved through their professional duties with enhanced awareness that their every interaction would be scrutinized not just by Chief Purser Francine and crew members, but by the memory of promises made to Captain King. "Ladies and gentlemen, from the flight deck," Dylan's voice filled the cabin during the initial climb out from Bridgetown. "We're experiencing beautiful flying weather today, with smooth conditions expected throughout our journey to Miami. Our cabin crew will begin service shortly, and we anticipate an on-time arrival this afternoon." In the cabin, Amelia moved through passenger interactions with her usual grace and competence, but Dylan caught the subtle tension in her posture that suggested she was thinking about their breakfast conversation and its implications. The 3-month timeline created a sense of urgency around proving their relationship's sustainability. 2 hours into the flight, a passenger situation arose that tested their professional partnership under exactly the kind of scrutiny they'd discussed with her father. An elderly gentleman in first class began experiencing what appeared to be cardiac symptoms, and Amelia's immediate response demonstrated the cultural sensitivity and medical competence that marked her best work. "Sir, I'm Ms. King," she said calmly, kneeling beside the passenger's seat while monitoring his vital signs. "I need you to try to stay calm while I check a few things. Are you feeling chest pain or shortness of breath?" Dylan watched through the cockpit monitors as Amelia worked with practiced efficiency, administering oxygen and gathering medical information while speaking to the passenger in the soothing cadences that always seemed to calm distressed travelers. "Captain," came her voice over the intercom, "passenger in 2A is experiencing chest discomfort. Vitals are stable, but I recommend medical consultation for potential diversion decision." Dylan felt pride surge through him at her professional competence, clear communication, appropriate medical response, deferring diversion decisions to captain authority, while providing all necessary information. This was exactly the kind of partnership that proved their personal relationship enhanced rather than compromised their professional performance. "Understood, Miss King," Dylan replied formally. "Continue monitoring while I consult with medical and evaluate options." But as Dylan coordinated with ground-based medical consultation and evaluated diversion airports, he noticed Chief Purser Francine observing the interaction with unusual intensity. Her expression suggested professional evaluation that went beyond routine emergency response assessment. The passenger's condition stabilized with medical intervention, and they continued to Miami without diversion. But during post-flight procedures, Francine approached Dylan with the purposeful stride that suggested important business. "Captain Hartwell," she said, her tone professionally neutral but somehow pointed, "could I speak with you privately about crew coordination and passenger care protocols?" Dylan felt his stomach tighten with apprehension. Francine's timing and manner suggested this conversation would address more than general procedures. "Of course, Chief Purser. My office?" "That would be appropriate," Francine replied, her sharp eyes holding his with unmistakable intent. 20 minutes later, seated across from Francine in his small captain's office, Dylan prepared for a conversation that could determine the future of his career and relationship. "Captain Hartwell," Francine said crisply, "I've been observing crew dynamics on your flights, and I have concerns about professional boundaries and their potential impact on operational efficiency. As Chief Purser, my responsibility includes ensuring that personal relationships don't compromise passenger safety or crew performance standards." Dylan kept his expression carefully neutral, while recognizing the seriousness of Francine's tone. Her concerns weren't punitive, they were protective of both company interests and crew welfare. "Could you be more specific about those concerns?" I can be very specific, Francine replied. The interaction patterns between you and Ms. King suggest personal involvement that goes beyond professional partnership. My concern isn't about your individual competence. Both of you are excellent at your jobs. My concern is about the precedent being set and the potential complications that could arise if this relationship encounters difficulties. The directness of her assessment left no room for denial or deflection. Dylan felt his carefully maintained professional control being tested in ways he'd hoped to avoid. Chief Purser Deepwater, he said carefully, Miss King and I maintain complete professionalism in all our interactions. Our teamwork has consistently received positive passenger feedback, and Captain Hartwell, Francine interrupted firmly. I've been in this industry for 20 years. I know the difference between professional teamwork and personal involvement disguised as professional teamwork. The question is whether you're going to acknowledge what's obviously happening or continue pretending that company policies don't apply to your situation. Dylan felt the weight of truth settling around the conversation. Denying their relationship was becoming impossible, but acknowledging it carried professional consequences he wasn't sure he was prepared to face. What exactly are you asking me to do? He said quietly. I'm asking you to make a choice, Francine replied, with the firmness of someone accustomed to difficult personnel decisions. Either acknowledge your relationship and accept the policy consequences, or end whatever personal involvement exists and return to purely professional interactions. But this current situation, pretending nothing's changed while the tension between you affects crew dynamics, is not sustainable. Dylan thought about Amelia, about their promises to each other, about Captain King's conditional approval, and the 3-month timeline for proving their relationship's value. Everything they'd worked toward, everything they'd hoped to build together, now faced the immediate threat of company policy enforcement. And if I acknowledge the relationship, then we follow standard protocol, Francine said matter-of-factly. Disclosure documentation, potential reassignment to prevent direct supervision conflicts, professional review to ensure company interests are protected. It doesn't automatically mean termination, but it does mean significant changes to current arrangements. Dylan felt something settle in his chest as he considered the options. Lying about their relationship was becoming impossible, and compromising Amelia's career to protect his own was unthinkable. But acknowledging their love meant accepting professional consequences that could affect everything they'd worked to achieve. Chief Purser Deepwater, Dylan said finally, I need 24 hours to consider the best path forward. You have until tomorrow's briefing, Francine replied, standing to leave. But Captain Hartwell, understand that this situation requires resolution. The current arrangement is not fair to Ms. King's career development, to crew operations, or to Atlantic Airways' professional standards. As Francine left his office, Dylan sat alone among his flight manuals and weather charts, facing the most important decision of his professional life. Love and career had collided with the force of Caribbean storms, and whatever choice he made would determine not just his future, but Amelia's as well. The flight toward their future together had encountered the most dangerous weather system yet, and Dylan wasn't sure his navigation skills were sufficient to guide them safely through to clear skies. But as he thought about Amelia's strength, their partnership, and the promises they'd made to each other and her father, he began to understand that some destinations were worth risking everything to reach. Tomorrow's briefing would determine whether their love could weather the ultimate professional storm, or whether the forces arrayed against them were too powerful for even the strongest hearts to overcome. Dylan spent that night walking along Miami Beach, the sound of Atlantic waves providing the soundtrack for the most difficult decision of his professional life. The warm Florida air carried scents of salt and tropical flowers, but his mind was consumed with weighing love against career, personal happiness against professional security, the future he wanted against the risks that choice demanded. By dawn, his decision was made. Not because the path was clear, but because some choices transcended logic to touch the very essence of who you were and what you valued most. And Dylan Hartwell valued the extraordinary woman who transformed his understanding of love, partnership, and courage, more than he valued the safety of professional status quo. The morning briefing room felt charged with anticipation as crew members assembled for their Miami to Bridgetown flight. Dylan arrived early, his decision settled but his nerves taut with awareness that the next hour would reshape everything about his future. When Amelia entered, her usual radiant confidence seemed dimmed by concern, and he realized she'd sensed the professional storm building around their relationship. "Good morning, everyone," Dylan began, his captain's voice steady despite the momentous choice he was about to make public. "Before we begin our operational briefing, I have an important announcement regarding crew assignments and company policy compliance." Chief Purser Francine's sharp attention focused on him with unmistakable intensity, while other crew members shifted in their seats with the restless energy of people sensing significant news. "Effective immediately," Dylan continued, meeting Amelia's eyes across the briefing room, "I am formally disclosing a personal relationship with Senior Flight Attendant Amelia King. We are submitting all required documentation to comply with Atlantic Airways' relationship disclosure policies, and we accept whatever operational adjustments may be necessary to maintain professional standards." The silence that followed was profound. Jennifer Adamson's expression showed a mixture of admiration and concern. Jake Peters looked genuinely surprised, and Francine's face revealed nothing beyond professional assessment. But Dylan's attention remained fixed on Amelia, whose eyes had filled with tears that reflected love, gratitude, and recognition of the courage his public declaration represented. "Furthermore," Dylan continued, his voice gaining strength from Amelia's emotional response, "I want to state for the record that Miss King's professional performance has been exemplary throughout our partnership. Any operational adjustments required by policy should in no way reflect negatively on her competence, dedication, or career advancement potential." "Captain Hartwell," Francine said crisply, "this disclosure will require immediate review by Atlantic Airways management and potential reassignment of crew members to different routes." "I understand, Chief Purser," Dylan replied formally. "We are prepared to accept whatever adjustments are necessary to maintain compliance while continuing to serve Atlantic Airways with professional excellence." Amelia stood, her posture straight and confident despite the emotional magnitude of the moment. "I would like to add that my relationship with Captain Hartwell has enhanced rather than compromised my professional development. Our partnership has resulted in exceptional passenger feedback and successful emergency responses. I stand behind both our personal choices and our professional performance." Dylan felt pride surge through him at her strength, her refusal to be diminished by circumstances or reduced to a passive participant in decisions that affected her career as much as his. "Very well," Francine said after a moment. "We'll proceed with today's flight under current assignments, but expect management review and potential changes for future operations." As the briefing continued with routine operational details, Dylan caught Amelia's grateful smile across the room and felt peace settle around his decision. Jennifer leaned over and whispered, "That took real courage, Dylan. I hope management recognizes what they have in your partnership." Whatever professional consequences followed, he'd chosen love over fear, partnership over politics, and a future they could build together over the safety of individual career protection. The flight to Bridgetown carried additional emotional weight as Dylan and Amelia navigated their professional duties with the knowledge that it might be their last trip together as captain and crew. Their every interaction was observed by colleagues who were reassessing their partnership through the lens of revealed personal involvement. But their teamwork remained seamlessly professional. "Ladies and gentlemen," from the flight deck, Dylan announced during their approach to Barbados, "We're beginning our descent into beautiful Bridgetown with perfect Caribbean weather conditions. Local time is 3:45 p.m., temperature is a lovely 84 degrees, and we expect an on-time arrival at Grantley Adams International." In the cabin, Amelia moved through landing preparations with her usual grace. But Dylan noticed other crew members treating her with new awareness, some with increased respect for her courage and publicly acknowledging their relationship, others with the careful distance that came from uncertainty about professional ramifications. During the final approach, an unexpected development tested their partnership under the most intense scrutiny possible. Air traffic control in Bridgetown advised of traffic conflicts requiring immediate course adjustments and approach modifications, the kind of complex navigation that demanded perfect crew coordination. "Atlantic 447 Bridgetown Tower," came the controller's voice. "Traffic conflict developing. Execute immediate right turn to heading 180. Descend and maintain 3,000 feet. Expect vectors for extended approach. Dylan responded with the crisp professionalism that marked experienced pilots. But the modified approach would require exceptional cabin crew preparation for passenger comfort during the extended flight time. Cabin crew, prepare for extended approach pattern, Dylan announced over the intercom. We'll be flying additional vectors due to traffic, adding approximately 15 minutes to our arrival time. Through the cockpit monitors, Dylan watched Amelia respond to the announcement with immediate action, moving through the cabin to inform passengers personally, checking that all safety equipment was properly secured for the longer approach, coordinating with other crew members to ensure passenger comfort during the delay. But what struck Dylan most powerfully was how naturally their teamwork continued despite the morning's revelations. Amelia anticipated his needs, he trusted her judgment completely, and their communication flowed with the seamless efficiency that had always marked their professional partnership. Beautiful crew coordination back there, Jake Peters commented as they executed the extended approach pattern. Whatever personal complications exist, your professional partnership with Amelia is textbook perfect. Dylan felt validation flood through him at Jake's observation. Their love hadn't compromised their professional performance, it had enhanced it, creating the kind of intuitive teamwork that elevated individual competence into collective excellence. As they touched down smoothly at Grantley Adams International, Dylan realized that their public declaration had actually strengthened, rather than weakened, their professional dynamic. No longer hiding their connection, they could work together with complete authenticity, while maintaining the professional boundaries that made their partnership effective. The Bridgetown layover brought an unexpected surprise when Captain Johan King appeared in the crew area, his presence immediately commanding attention from Atlantic Airways personnel. But his expression wasn't the concerned protectiveness Dylan had expected. Instead, he wore the subtle smile of someone who'd received interesting news. "Captain Hartwell," Johan said, approaching with extended hand, "I hear you made some important announcements today." Dylan felt heat creep up his neck, realizing that news of their disclosure had somehow reached Captain King within hours. "Yes, sir. We felt it was important to be honest about our relationship and accept whatever professional consequences followed." "And what consequences are you expecting?" Johan asked, his dark eyes sharp with interest. "Potential reassignment to different routes," Dylan replied honestly. "Company policy review. Possible changes to our crew partnerships. We're prepared for whatever adjustments are necessary." Johan nodded thoughtfully, then turned to his daughter with paternal pride evident in his expression. "And you, baby girl, how do you feel about Dylan's public declaration?" Amelia's smile was radiant. "Proud, Papa. Proud that he chose transparency over convenience, love over career safety. That's the kind of courage Caribbean families respect." "Indeed it is," Johan agreed, then surprised Dylan by placing a hand on his shoulder. "In Caribbean culture, Captain Hartwell, we believe that a man's true character is revealed when he faces difficult choices. Today you chose to protect my daughter's reputation, even when it might have been easier to protect your own position." Dylan felt something shift in Johan's demeanor, not complete approval yet, but recognition of integrity that transcended cultural concerns about age and position. "Papa," Amelia said softly, "there's something else we need to tell you." Both men turned their attention to her, and Dylan felt anticipation spike through his nervous system. "Atlantic Airways management has scheduled a review meeting for next week," Amelia continued. "They're evaluating our situation to determine whether our relationship can coexist with continued professional partnership or whether policy requires reassignment." Johan's expression became more serious. "And what's your assessment of that review?" "We're hopeful that our professional performance record will support continued partnership," Dylan replied. "But we're prepared for separation if that's what policy requires. Separation of roots, not relationship," Amelia added firmly. "Whatever happens professionally, Dylan and I are committed to building our future together." Johan studied them both with the penetrating assessment Dylan had come to expect, then nodded slowly. "Then you'll want to know that I've had some conversations of my own today." Both Dylan and Amelia looked at him with surprise and curiosity. Caribbean Aviation Safety Council has been looking for experienced captain-crew partnerships for our new international training program, Johan continued. Cultural sensitivity combined with exceptional safety records, exactly what you two have demonstrated. If Atlantic Airways can't accommodate your situation, other opportunities exist. Dylan felt his heart race at the implication. Captain King wasn't just offering conditional family acceptance. He was suggesting professional alternatives that could support their relationship while honoring their careers. "Papa," Amelia said with obvious emotion, "you would do that for us?" "I would do that for my daughter's happiness and for partnership that elevates Caribbean aviation standards," Johan replied, with paternal love tempered by professional assessment. "But first, let's see how Atlantic Airways responds to your courage. Sometimes companies surprise you with wisdom when you give them the chance." The flight back to Miami carried the weight of uncertain futures and profound hope. Dylan and Amelia performed their duties with enhanced awareness that every aspect of their teamwork would be scrutinized by management reviewers. But their partnership remained flawlessly professional while their personal connection deepened through shared courage. "Captain," came First Officer Peter's voice during cruise flight, "I've got to say, watching you two work together today, the disclosure this morning, the extended approach coordination, the way you support each other without compromising professional standards, it's impressive. Whatever management decides, you've proven that personal relationships can enhance rather than threaten operational excellence." Dylan felt gratitude for Jake's support, understanding that crew member observations would carry significant weight in management's evaluation. "Thank you, Jake. That means a great deal coming from you." "Just the truth," Jake replied. "And, for what it's worth, I hope they're smart enough to recognize what they have in your partnership." 2 hours later, as they began their descent into Miami, Dylan felt anticipation building not just for landing, but for the week ahead. Management review, policy decisions, the determination of whether their love could survive within Atlantic Airways' corporate structure, or whether new paths would be required. "Ladies and gentlemen, from the flight deck," Dylan announced, "we're beginning our descent into Miami International, with clear skies and perfect landing conditions. It's been our pleasure to serve you today, and we thank you for flying Atlantic Airways." In the cabin, Amelia's voice followed his with the warmth that always marked her passenger interactions. "On behalf of the entire crew, thank you for choosing Atlantic Airways for your journey between beautiful Barbados and Miami. We hope to see you again soon, and we wish you safe travels to your final destinations." As they touched down in Miami, Dylan realized that regardless of management's decision, he and Amelia had already reached their most important destination, a love strong enough to weather professional storms, transparent enough to withstand scrutiny, and authentic enough to build a future that honored both their individual dreams and their shared commitment. The week ahead would determine whether that future included Atlantic Airways or required new horizons, but Dylan felt confident that whatever challenges arose, they would navigate them together with the same partnership that had carried them safely through every storm so far. Have you ever had to choose between love and career safety? Between what your heart knew was right and what seemed professionally practical? I'd love to hear your thoughts about the courage it takes to fight for relationships that matter, even when the stakes feel overwhelming. Drop your experiences in the comments. Your stories inspire all of us to be braver in love. The following week brought a series of meetings that would determine not just Dylan and Amelia's professional future, but the precedent Atlantic Airways would set for handling crew relationships that transcended traditional boundaries. The company's executive conference room felt formal and imposing as Dylan and Amelia sat across from a panel that included Chief Purser Francine, Operations Manager Robert Chen, and Human Resources Director Patricia Williams. "Captain Hartwell, Miss King," Patricia Williams began, her tone professionally neutral. "We're here to review your disclosure of personal relationship and its impact on Atlantic Airways operations. We've examined passenger feedback, crew evaluations, and safety records for all flights you've worked together." Dylan felt Amelia's hand briefly touch his knee under the table, a gesture of support that reminded him they were facing this evaluation as partners. Regardless of its outcome, The data is quite remarkable, Patricia continued, consulting her tablet. Passenger satisfaction scores for your flights consistently exceed department averages. Your emergency response coordination has been exemplary. Crew members report exceptional teamwork and professional excellence. Dylan and Amelia exchanged glances, cautiously optimistic about the direction of the review. However, Robert Chen interjected. Company policy exists for valid reasons. Captain-subordinate relationships create inherent challenges for authority structures, performance evaluations, and potential conflicts of interest. We understand those concerns, Dylan replied respectfully. We're prepared to accept whatever adjustments are necessary to maintain policy compliance while continuing to serve Atlantic Airways effectively. What adjustments are you envisioning? Patricia asked. Route reassignment to eliminate direct supervision, Amelia said clearly. Separate crew scheduling, different operational chains of command. Whatever structure allows us to maintain professional excellence while honoring company policies. Chief Purser Francine spoke for the first time since the meeting began. In my 20 years with Atlantic Airways, I've seen several crew relationships that began with good intentions, but ultimately compromised professional standards. What makes you believe your situation will be different? Dylan felt the weight of that question, understanding that their answer could determine everything about their future with the company. Because our relationship has already been tested under pressure, he replied. Emergency situations, cultural complexities, family scrutiny, professional evaluation. Every challenge has strengthened rather than weakened our partnership. We don't just love each other. We make each other better at everything that matters. Furthermore, Amelia added, we've demonstrated that transparency enhances rather than threatens our professional performance. When we stopped hiding our connection, our teamwork became even more effective because we could be completely authentic while maintaining appropriate boundaries. Patricia Williams leaned forward slightly, her expression suggesting genuine interest rather than mere policy review. You're asking us to trust that your personal relationship will continue to enhance rather than compromise your professional contributions. We're asking you to evaluate us based on results rather than assumptions, Dylan said firmly. Our performance record speaks for itself. We're requesting the opportunity to continue proving that love and professional excellence can coexist when both are approached with integrity and commitment. The panel exchanged glances, conducting the kind of silent communication that marked experienced management teams making difficult decisions. We're going to try something unprecedented, Patricia Williams announced after a long moment. Atlantic Airways is implementing a new policy framework for crew relationships that emphasize performance standards rather than blanket prohibitions. Dylan felt his heart race with hope and anticipation. Under this framework, Patricia continued, you will continue working together on the Miami-Bridgetown route, but with enhanced monitoring and quarterly performance reviews. Any decline in professional standards, passenger satisfaction, or crew dynamics will result in immediate reassignment. Additionally, Robert Chen added, you'll be participating in a company study on crew partnerships that could influence industry-wide policy development. Your success or failure will have implications beyond your individual careers. Dylan felt the weight of responsibility settling around their opportunity, not just their own future, but the potential to create new pathways for other couples facing similar challenges. We accept those terms, Amelia said firmly, and we're honored to have the opportunity to prove that love can enhance rather than threaten professional excellence. There's one more thing, Chief Purser Francine said, her expression showing something that might have been respect. Captain King contacted our CEO personally to vouch for your partnership and its potential benefit to Caribbean aviation development. That endorsement carried significant weight in our decision. Dylan felt overwhelming gratitude toward Captain Johan King, whose support had transcended family acceptance to become professional advocacy. The man who'd initially questioned their relationship had become their most powerful champion. Thank you, Dylan said quietly. All of you, for seeing past conventional policies to evaluate actual performance, for trusting us to prove what we know is true about our partnership. Don't thank us yet, Patricia warned with a slight smile. Prove us right through continued excellence. Show the aviation industry that love and professionalism can coexist when both are approached with integrity. As they left the conference room, Dylan and Amelia walked in companionable silence until they reached the parking garage, where the weight of their victory finally settled around them. "We did it," Amelia said softly, turning to face him with eyes bright with tears of relief and joy. "We actually did it." "We did it," Dylan agreed, pulling her into his arms for a kiss that tasted like victory and new beginnings. Together, like everything else. As they held each other in the Miami sunshine, surrounded by the sounds of airport operations and the promise of flights yet to come, Dylan realized that their greatest adventure was just beginning. They'd proven that love could weather professional storms, that partnerships could transcend conventional boundaries, and that courage was sometimes rewarded with opportunities to change not just individual futures, but entire industries. The sky ahead was limitless, and they would navigate it together, as lovers, as partners, and as proof that some connections were strong enough to transform everything they touched. 6 months later, the Miami to Bridgetown route had become something of a legend within Atlantic Airways. Passenger satisfaction scores consistently exceeded company records. Crew members requested assignments to Dylan and Amelia's flights, and their partnership had been featured in Aviation Weekly as an example of how professional excellence could transcend conventional boundaries. But for Dylan and Amelia, the real measure of their success wasn't found in corporate recognition or industry articles. It was found in the quiet moments between flights, in the seamless partnership that had evolved from attraction into love, into something approaching destiny itself. Captain Hartwell came the familiar voice of air traffic control as they approached Bridgetown for what had become their signature route. "Barbados Tower has you cleared for visual approach, runway 09. Wind calm, visibility unlimited, welcome back to paradise." "Roger, Barbados Tower," Dylan replied with the easy confidence that marked thousands of hours navigating Caribbean skies. "Visual approach, runway 09, Atlantic 447. In the cabin behind him, Amelia's melodic voice carried the warmth that had made her legendary among passengers who traveled regularly between Miami and Barbados. "Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our descent into beautiful Bridgetown, I want to thank you for choosing Atlantic Airways for your journey home to paradise. Whether you're returning to family, pursuing dreams, or building bridges between cultures, we're honored to be part of your story." Dylan smiled at her words, recognizing the deeper meaning beneath passenger service protocol. They had indeed become part of countless stories, reuniting families, enabling dreams, building the very bridges between cultures that aviation was meant to create. As they touched down smoothly on Barbadian soil, Dylan felt the familiar satisfaction of another successful flight, but also something deeper, gratitude for the journey that had brought them from professional colleagues to life partners, from careful distance to complete trust, from individual competence to partnership that elevated everything they touched. "Beautiful landing, Captain," came First Officer Peter's voice. "6 months of flying with you two. And I still can't get over how perfectly you work together. It's like watching aviation poetry in motion." "Thank you, Jake," Dylan replied, but his attention was already shifting to post-flight procedures and the evening that awaited in Barbados. Dinner with Captain Johan King and his wife Grace, who had become not just family, but mentors in navigating the beautiful complexity of Caribbean culture. The King family home in Christchurch embodied everything Dylan had learned to love about Caribbean culture: warm hospitality, family connections that transcended blood relations, and the kind of genuine community that made strangers feel like long-lost relatives within hours of arrival. "Dylan, my boy," Captain Johan King called from the veranda where he was preparing traditional Bajan flying fish with the practiced skill of someone who'd learned Caribbean cooking from his own grandmother. "Come help me with this seasoning. Grace says I still haven't mastered her mother's recipe after 30 years of marriage." Dylan laughed, moving to join his future father-in-law at the outdoor cooking area. The easy familiarity still amazed him, 6 months earlier, he'd been nervous about gaining Captain King's approval, and now he was considered family enough to receive cooking instruction and gentle teasing about his American palate. "Papa's been teaching Dylan Caribbean aviation history," Amelia said to her mother as they arranged traditional sides on the outdoor dining table. "Did you know that Dylan can now identify every island in the windward chain by their approach patterns?" Grace King smiled, with the warm approval that had welcomed Dylan into their family circle. "Cultural education is important when you're marrying into Caribbean aviation royalty. Dylan needs to understand the heritage he's joining." The casual mention of marriage sent warmth through Dylan's chest, not because it was unexpected. He and Amelia had discussed their future extensively, but because it represented complete family acceptance of their partnership. Captain King's initial concerns about age gaps and power dynamics had evolved into respect for their demonstrated love and mutual support. "Speaking of marriage," Dylan said, his voice carrying nervous anticipation that immediately captured everyone's attention, "there's something I wanted to discuss with all of you." Amelia looked at him with curious surprise, while Captain King's expression shifted to the protective assessment that still surfaced during important family conversations. Dylan reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box that contained not just an engagement ring, but 6 months of careful planning, cultural consultation, and the kind of nervous anticipation that made navigating Caribbean thunderstorms seem simple by comparison. Dylan said formally, his voice steady despite his racing heart, "6 months ago you challenged me to prove that my love for Amelia honored Caribbean values and enhanced rather than threatened her dreams. I hope I've begun to earn your trust and approval." Johan's expression softened with paternal pride and recognition of Dylan's respect for proper cultural protocols. "Amelia," Dylan continued, turning to face the woman who'd transformed every aspect of his understanding of love, partnership, and courage, "you taught me that age is just data when hearts recognize their perfect match. You showed me that professional partnerships can enhance personal love, that courage comes in many forms, and that some connections transcend every barrier society tries to place between them." Amelia's eyes filled with tears as Dylan dropped to one knee on the veranda of her family home, surrounded by the warmth of Caribbean evening air and the love of people who'd become his chosen family. "Amelia King," he said, opening the ring box to reveal a stunning diamond, surrounded by smaller stones in a setting that honored both elegant tradition and contemporary style. "Will you marry me? Will you continue building bridges between cultures, between hearts, between dreams, as my wife and partner in everything life brings our way?" The silence that followed was profound, filled with the sound of Caribbean waves in the distance, and the weight of love finally finding its perfect expression. "Yes," Amelia said through tears of joy, her melodic accent rich with emotion. "Yes, to all of it. Marriage, partnership, building bridges together, navigating whatever storms or clear skies the future brings." As Dylan slipped the ring onto her finger, Captain King's voice carried across the veranda with warmth and approval. "Welcome to the family, son. Welcome to Caribbean aviation royalty and all the beautiful complications that come with it." Grace King was already moving toward the kitchen, her voice carrying the efficient joy of a mother planning engagement celebrations. "We need to call everyone, the cousins in Trinidad, the aviation family in Jamaica, the church committee. This calls for proper Caribbean celebration." Later that evening, as they walked along the same beach where they'd shared their first kiss 9 months earlier, Dylan and Amelia reflected on the journey that had brought them from professional colleagues to engaged partners, preparing to build their future together. "Are you ready for Caribbean wedding planning?" Amelia asked with a laugh, her engagement ring catching moonlight as she gestured toward the lights of Bridgetown in the distance. "Because Mama Grace and the church ladies are going to have opinions about everything from flowers to guest lists to reception music. I'm ready for whatever comes with loving you," Dylan replied, pulling her close as they paused where gentle waves met the shore. Caribbean wedding traditions, family expectations, aviation schedules, all of it, as long as we navigate it together. Amelia's smile was radiant in the tropical moonlight. "Do you ever think about how we almost missed this? How company policies and age concerns and professional complications almost kept us from discovering what we could be together?" Every day, Dylan admitted. But I also think about how every challenge made us stronger. Every barrier we overcame proved that what we have is worth fighting for. We didn't just fall in love, we chose love, again and again, even when it was difficult. And we'll keep choosing it, Amelia said with quiet conviction. Through whatever comes next, marriage, career changes, family expansions, all the beautiful complications of building a life together. As they stood in the place where their love story had truly begun, surrounded by Caribbean stars and the infinite possibility of shared futures, Dylan realized that their greatest adventure was still ahead. They'd proven that love could transcend age gaps, that professional partnerships could enhance personal relationships, that courage was sometimes rewarded with opportunities to change not just individual lives, but entire industry perspectives. One more thing, Dylan said, reaching into his other pocket to withdraw a small wrapped package. I have something else for you. Amelia's surprise was genuine as she unwrapped what appeared to be a business card holder. But when she opened it, she found something that made her gasp with delighted recognition. Captain Amelia King Hartwell, she read from the embossed cards inside. Caribbean Airways International Training Division. Your father's new training program needs experienced instructors, Dylan explained with a grin. And I hear they're looking for a husband and wife team with proven expertise in cultural aviation partnerships. Amelia's laughter was pure joy as she realized what he was offering. Not just marriage, but a professional future that honored both their aviation dreams and their Caribbean cultural values. You talked to Papa about this? She asked, already knowing the answer from Dylan's conspiratorial expression. I talked to Papa about everything, Dylan confirmed. About honoring your career ambitions, about building something together that celebrates Caribbean aviation excellence, about creating opportunities for other couples who want to prove that love and professional success can coexist. As they kissed under Caribbean stars, surrounded by the sound of gentle waves and the promise of infinite possibilities, Dylan and Amelia knew they'd found something that transcended every challenge they'd faced. Love that honored heritage while building new traditions. Partnership that enhanced individual dreams while creating shared destiny. Courage that transformed obstacles into opportunities for growth. Their flight toward forever was just beginning, and the navigation would require all the skills they'd learned. Trust, communication, cultural respect, professional excellence, and the kind of love that made everything else possible. But looking into each other's eyes, feeling the perfect rightness of their connection, they knew they were ready for whatever skies awaited their journey together. As our story draws to a close, dear Royal Story family, we've witnessed something beautiful. Two hearts that refused to let society's rules define the boundaries of their love. Dylan and Amelia taught us that age becomes irrelevant when souls recognize their perfect match, that professional excellence can coexist with passionate love when both are approached with integrity and courage. Their journey reminds us that the most meaningful connections often require us to be brave enough to fight for what matters, wise enough to honor cultural values while building new traditions, and strong enough to prove that love can transcend every barrier placed in its path. In a world that often tells us who we should love based on age, position, or circumstance, Dylan and Amelia chose to love based on character, compatibility, and the kind of partnership that makes both people stronger. They showed us that real love doesn't diminish professional dreams, it enhances them, creating the kind of teamwork that elevates everything it touches. Most importantly, they demonstrated that courage comes in many forms. Sometimes it's the courage to risk career security for love. Sometimes it's the strength to maintain professional excellence under scrutiny. And sometimes it's the wisdom to build bridges between cultures while honoring the heritage that shapes us. Thank you for flying with us on this journey of hearts that found their home in each other, despite every reason they should have remained apart. Before you go, I'd love to know, what moved you most about Dylan and Amelia's story? Was it their professional partnership, their cultural bridge building, the way they navigated family expectations? Or something else entirely? And have you ever had to fight for a love that others questioned? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your stories inspire all of us to be braver in love. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button to let me know it resonated with you. And if you haven't already joined our Royal Story family, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you'll never miss these journeys of love that remind us what's possible when we're brave enough to follow our hearts. Your throne in this kingdom of stories is always waiting for you. Until our paths cross again in tomorrow's story, remember that you are worthy of love that sees past every barrier to the beautiful soul you are. Keep your hearts open to the kind of connections that transform everything they touch, and never let anyone convince you that age, position, or circumstance should limit the love you're brave enough to claim. This is Sage King, sending love across the miles to wherever you are in this beautiful world. Sweet dreams, dear family, and thank you for letting me share this flight of the heart with you.